Good evening and welcome to the City Council meeting for June 21st, 2021. The time is now 5 p.m. and I'll begin by calling the roll. So Councilman De La Garza,
I am present.
Councilman Bachnight,
Here.
Councilwoman Scott,
Here.
Councilman Young,
Here.
Councilman Lofgren,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Solis is not here with us tonight. Because she's not attending the meeting, I will be calling the meeting to order at this time and ask City Attorney Gush to explain the process to choose a council member to conduct the meeting.
Good evening, council members. As Ms. Hilbrook has said, Josephine Solis is unable to be at the meeting tonight, and I wanted to just quickly walk through a process to appoint someone to chair the meeting this evening. This mouse is not advancing the slides. Can you? As soon as we get the slides to advance, we'll go forward. But the key point to bear in mind is that our city charter does say what to do in the case of the mayor being absent from the meeting. It says that the mayor pro tem will run the meeting, but it does not say what to do if both the mayor and the mayor pro tem are absent from the meeting. That is something we can clarify through the charter process that's going on this fall. But for now, it is silent on that issue. Robert's Rules does have a process for how to appoint someone to run a meeting when the president and vice president is not present. Then the secretary calls the meeting to order, and the assembly should immediately elect a chairman pro tem to preside during that meeting. And so that's what we're going to do this evening, is to have council members nominate one member of council to be the chair for the meeting tonight. We can simply do it by a voice nomination. If someone wants to nominate another member, we'll ask that person if they accept, and then we will vote on that nomination. And if the vote passes, that person will chair the meeting for this evening. Are there any questions? Then I'll open nominations. Does anyone want to nominate a member to run the meeting, including themselves? Yes, sir. Dr. Young?
Yes, I'll nominate Councilmember Bachnight to be Chairman Pro Tem.
Mr. Bogdan, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
All those in favor of nominating?
Was there
Mr.
any
Bachnight?
others? Did you want to ask if there was any others?
Are there any others? Are there any others? Are there any others?
Thank you.
I kind of expected everyone else to reject it if they got nominated. So, once you've got somebody willing to accept.
I agree, but
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Mr. Bognight, if you kindly chair the meeting for us.
Thank you. Would y'all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will take a moment of silence to allow each member of the City Council and those in attendance to prepare their hearts and minds to appropriately do the business of our city. Thank you.
I can't figure out how to put this thing to hold.
It's Zoom, right?
I'm in the meeting, I just don't know.
It sounded like
I want to welcome everybody. Seating in the council chambers remains limited to allow for social distancing, and there are still many residents in our high-risk population. For those reasons, we will continue allowing citizen participation through video conferencing. To learn about all the ways you can watch the meeting and participate remotely, we encourage you to visit www.victoriatx.gov/talk-to-council. There are many options for how you can participate in our meeting tonight, ranging from watching on TV or speaking in citizens' comments through Zoom. For those citizens that wish to speak in person to the council during citizens' communication or during a public hearing, we ask that you complete a comment card and give it to a staff member. Comment cards are located outside the door of the chamber. We have not received any comment cards today. I am opening citizens' communication if there's anybody else that would like to speak. Is there anybody remotely? No? Okay. Then we will close citizens' communications and go into our work session. And I will turn it over to Mr. Jesus Garza. Welcome back. And congratulations on the new son.
Thank you. I appreciate
Happy
it.
first Father's Day.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. It was awesome. Got to eat some barbecue, the whole works. Thank you. I do want to, before I begin, I want to quickly mention that I believe Josephine did join remotely. And so she was planning on at some point being able to join remotely to tune in and listen. But just so you know, she was okay with the process that we just undertook. So there won't be a need for any change there. In any case, so as you know, today we began our work sessions to discuss the fiscal year 22 proposed budget. This year has been a really good year for us because we've utilized the new software that has really facilitated the process internally, and hopefully everybody from the public and you as council enjoy the new product. And I'll walk through that a little bit this evening. After going through a budget overview and going through a little bit of how OpenGov works, we will begin going through the various departments' stories. That is the process that we're following this year. We aren't necessarily doing PowerPoints other than my overview PowerPoint. There will be stories that we will go through one by one at a time. The goal is for us to go through all of these stories over the course of the next 2 nights. I know that we posted for 3 meetings this week, and as is customary every year, we do that just in case something takes longer than anticipated or there's further discussion that's needed. But just so you know, we're going to try and knock them out in 2 evenings. And this evening, we for sure envision going through the overview. As I mentioned, we'll go through the administrative departments as well as some internal service funds and go through public safety departments. Tomorrow, we'll hit on developmental departments, departments touching quality of life, the Motel Tax Fund, and some public works department. And then I'll quickly do a budget wrap up at the end, highlighting the budget calendar for the rest of the process. To get us going, as I alluded to, I want to touch on OpenGov a little further. OpenGov was a software that council approved the purchase of last year, which really helped us develop the budget and really provides us an easier tool to be able to track expenses, revenues, be able to show them in a way that is more easily accessible. You may recall that in the past, I've spoken a little bit about my opinion on the distinction between transparency and accessibility. And the reality is that all cities are transparent because we are, and we have to be, right? Budget documents are online. Obviously, meetings are public. But once we take it a step further, we have to ask ourselves, well, how accessible truly are our documents, are our budgets? And so this software allows us to be more accessible with the information. And I want to show you exactly where that information is available online. So let me see if I can get the mouse back over here. All right, there we go. So if the public or anybody wanted to go to our victoriatx.gov website and simply scroll down, they'll see a button here for fiscal year annual budget. Click that. Very easily find our fiscal year 22 proposed budget. Then we click the link to take us to the OpenGov aspect of it, and we have this landing page. This landing page you're going to see this landing page quite a bit because this is the page where a lot of the departments will click on their own department to go through their story. But this landing page really has all of the information needed, and it facilitates you or anybody specifically interested in a department to be able to access that. And so all of these are linked to stories. And so if anybody simply wanted to click on municipal court, learn about municipal court, they could do that. If they wanted to learn about community appearance, they could do that. And it goes on and on and on. And in our opinion, this dramatically increases the accessibility aspect of the information, because if you recall, the way it was before was a multiple 100-page document. And if you wanted to find a specific area, it was possible, but it just took a little more time. And so we really are very excited about this much easier way to access the information. Tonight, I'm going to go through the budget overview. I'm going to go through it through a PowerPoint, not through the story, but I do want to convey that the overview story version of the budget overview is also available on the same link. And so one of the things that I will walk everybody through today is, of course, where we stand with the overall budget, the governmental side, special revenue funds, by how much money did it go up, why did it go up, expenses, revenues, all of that information is located in this overview that I will go through in PowerPoint form. But again, the point here is to simply convey that this information is available online and very easily accessible and very easily to navigate. Any questions on that? No? Okay, great. Can you send me back to the PowerPoint? Great. So fiscal year 22 budget story, we could really break it down into categories to make it very simple. We're going to hit on the economic recovery and how that impacts our sales tax revenue. Obviously, our budget is balanced as it legally has to every year. One of the big expenditures or proposed expenditures in this year's budget is attached to a compensation study and a pay program that I'll also go through in detail just this evening. Grant programs is also a big story. Capital improvement plan, which of course we've been talking about for many months. There will be an opportunity to lower the property tax rate because of increased appraised values, and so we'll hit on that. I'm sure everybody has realized that values have increased in our community, and so that presents an opportunity for us to have a good conversation about the property tax rate. And I'll briefly hit on the health plan because that's obviously something that has been at the forefront of our minds over the last 2 years as we try and create a financially stable plan for our employees. So really quickly, the fiscal year 22 proposed budget in totality equates to $163 million. Last year, it was $146 million. And so I'll go through the increases here in a little bit. On the right is the budget wheel, which we created last year for the first time, that very easily gives you a snapshot of revenues and expenditures for the general fund. We only do the budget wheel for the general fund because we recognize that that is the fund that is of highest interest to everybody, since that is the fund where our property tax revenues go into. That is the fund that funds police and fire, which obviously public safety is always the highest priority, considering it takes up more than half of the general fund. But I'll hit a little bit in more detail on the general fund in a later slide. In terms of the overall budget, you probably noticed that it's close to a $13 million increase. That is due to a $7 million increase in our governmental funds, and I'll go through that here shortly as well. $5.1 million in enterprise funds and $387,000 in internal service funds. Also really quickly, as is traditional with all of our financial related presentations, anything that you see in parentheses and in red is indicative of a reduction in that category or in that area specifically. So for example, we mentioned that grants was a big part of the story of this year's budget. It's actually because grant funds have decreased significantly, and that's why you see those in parentheses in red. And again, I'll go through that.
Be clear,
here in a
though,
little
your
bit.
pie chart is not reductions, even though it's red.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. We just like the color red.
Just wanted to be technical.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. This kind of takes a little bit of a deeper dive into that variance. And so you'll see on the taxes side that we are seeing an increase in close to $2.2 million in tax revenue through a combination of property tax, sales tax, and motel tax. And we'll obviously break that down a little further. Municipal court fees are continuing to decline. And so that is something that we recognize that it's something that necessitates some attention on our part on how we want to approach those, that angle or that perspective. You'll see that some of the intergovernmental CIP funds went up significantly to the tune of $8 million, $5 million, $3 million in various categories. We'll actually run through those here in a little bit as well. On the right-hand side, you'll see what I mentioned about the decrease in grant programs, how those have decreased to a tune of about $7 million. And I've got a slide that very specifically showcases which grants were the ones that we no longer have and the one that we will be dealing with over the course of the next year. Sales tax, very briefly. I mentioned that economic recovery was a big part of the fiscal year's budget, and it is. So you'll notice here that what we're proposing actually puts us at a level that we saw back in 2019. And so you'll see that we have proposed close to $17.2 million. And looking at the history, you'll notice that we were at $17.1 million in 2019. We know that and feel fairly confident that that's a good conservative approach to it. We know that there are many factors that are impacting sales tax revenues, obviously the overall economy, the unemployment rate, stimulus funds. There are so many different things that impact sales tax. Obviously, recently there was also a conversation about a change in the state based off of destination versus origin and things of that sort. So we feel fairly confident that the close to $17.2 million in sales tax revenue is pretty conservative from our perspective. You'll see that projected for fiscal year 21, we actually are envisioning getting close to 17.5. But again, we know that some of that is due to some of the stimulus dollars that have been circulating around over the past year. We know that that always plays a role when the government provides a check to individuals, they spend that money, but obviously that's not a recurring source of income for individuals. And so that's not necessarily something that we anticipate being permanent long-term, and so we need to be cognizant of that. And the reality is that even though we foresee changes in sales tax in terms of destination versus the sourcing aspect of it, there's too many variables there to really understand what the impact would be for us. And so for us, it makes most sense to give it a year to kind of see what that looks like for us before we really take a jump to accounting for what that increase is. So for now, we have it close to 17.2. I can also tell you that we haven't updated the slide, but for example, the May assumption number here that shows it's still in red at $1.4 million, that actually came in at 1.5 million. So there's a chance that we actually exceed our projection for fiscal year 21 by a little bit. But we'll know more as we get finalize the budget to a final proposed stage, which would come to you in August. On the tax rate, we have made some assumptions, as we obviously have to for sakes of putting budgets together. You'll see, of course, the thing of note is circled on the bottom left, which is the percentage of the increase in net taxable appraised values, which is 6.8%. We've gone back and looked at what that year over year has been over the last 10 years, and that's pretty significant. I know that a lot of us have personally realized that appraised values have gone up a significant percentage. To be determined what that end final number looks like, because we don't receive certified tax rolls from the appraisal district until next month. And so that might impact that number. You'll see that there's still over $830 million under protest currently. And so that number won't trickle down until the certified tax rolls come in next month. So again, this number will be around this number, but we won't know for sure until next month. But this is the assumption that we made for conversation's sake. On the right-hand side, you'll see some information related to the tax rate. You'll notice that we are now officially using the new verbiage of the tax rate because that was a change that happened, 2 sessions. I guess technically 2 sessions ago now. And so we're no longer even in writing putting effective tax rate or anything like that. But the voter approval tax rate, which would have been your effective, you could see what that tax rate is. Our current tax rate is the 0.6115. And you'll see that the voter approval tax rate, or what was known as the effective tax rate, is the 0.594. The no new revenue tax rate is the effective tax rate, which is the tax rate of 0.5744. You'll notice that our proposed tax rate is slightly above the effective tax rate at 0.5844, which we envision generating a little over $500,000, and you'll see that at the bottom there on the 545,000, which is roughly 3% of our total revenue from property taxes. Of that, we always like to point out how much of it is due to new improvements. And so from that amount, we estimate that 200,000 is from new improvements. Now, we recognize that any time that we increase our revenue from property taxes, regardless of the percentage, it's important to have conversations about what we attribute those funds to. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, of course, as I already alluded to, is the pay program. And so we want to make sure that we have the funds to be able to, in a sustainable fashion, be able to keep up with the compensation for our employees. One of the things that Chief Arredondo will talk about is the fact that they are in the process of applying for another COPS grant. You may recall that last year we were awarded a COPS grant that added 4 officers. And so they're applying for another grant to be able to add even more officers. And even though that grant allows us to steer step into fully covering those positions, that's an obligation that at that point we have to plan for. And so at the end of the day, what we envision applying that increase in property tax revenue is to, again, help with the addition of the police officers should we get this additional COPS grant program, but then also the overall pay program that we'll go through in detail here in a little bit. Now, for purpose of the property tax rate, that's obviously not anything that needs to be finalized now. This is just preliminary. As you know, we'll have very specific property tax hearings in the near future. But leading up to that, we did want to put some food for thought for you to just consider and think about. Obviously, the fact that the appraised values are higher than normal does present opportunities to be able to lower the tax rate while also increasing our revenues. And so there's two options on here. The option on the left decreases the tax rate from our current tax rate, but increases it slightly from the proposed tax rate from the previous slide, which would increase our property tax revenue to $762,000, which would create an opportunity for us to pump a little over $200,000 for the street maintenance program or for whatever other specific program we may want to add on that isn't already contemplated in the balanced budget. On the right-hand side, there is an option there to pay off some debt sooner. I know that through our CIP conversations, we've talked about paying debt sooner, and we've made some assumptions on our tax base increasing as part of that conversation, but I guarantee you those assumptions were not based off of our tax base growing 6%, 7%, or 8%. All of our assumptions were based off of an average of about 1.5% every year. And so everything that comes in after that is really a positive opportunity for us to even have a conversation to pay off debt even sooner. So for example, the option on the right would pay off some debt sooner by being able to apply that same $217,000, but instead of going through an operating program, it could go towards paying off debt, which would free up $3.5 million on top of all of the available debt that we've talked about leading up to this point. And I know, Jan, I know you had a question about this that you had emailed about, and I hope that
For now,
explained it some.
Yeah.
Because that is our intent. So our CIP, even if we change nothing and simply just stuck with the CIP recommendation, we're already on track to pay off some debt sooner. All this would do is help us pay even more debt, even more sooner or more soon, to be able to create some additional capacity. But we'll have those conversations in the next couple of months as things get finalized with the property tax rate. Any questions on that? Okay. So really quickly, the motel tax receipts, we are budgeting a slight rebound, but not to the tune of 2019. So we're not following the same methodology as we are with sales tax with motel tax. That's very intentional, and Derek will get more into that tomorrow. But nonetheless, it is an increase compared to 21 and compared to the actual in 2020 as well. The CIP program is a pretty robust program to the tune of $31 million. This is the program that's been presented to you since December that we had discussions about leading up until May. I have another slide that'll back up the comment that the CIP program is the richest CIP program that we've had in a year. A big part of that is driven by the fact that we have the Ben Wilson project with UHV and those funds coming in. And so that obviously balloons the number up because you'll see that $7 million there coming from UHV. On the major grants program, you may recall I mentioned a reduction of close to $7 million. And so in fiscal year 21, we had a lot of CDBG funds still, as well as the NRCS grants, which were the erosion projects at the park. Of course, all of that's closed out or in the process of being closed out. And so really the only large grant program that we envision having in fiscal year 22 is the second half of the Rescue Plan Act program. And so that's what we're accounting for in the budget. On the expense side, I'm going to go quickly to talking about the meat of it, which is the net pay program. And so I want to make a couple of comments before we start going through this pay program slide. So last year in fiscal year 21, we actually approved a budget that included $350,000 for a pay program for police and firefighters. At the time, we weren't sure how far that would get us. We weren't sure what the implementation of that program would look like because we hadn't completed the compensation study yet. That pay program went into effect in January of this year and actually was closer to the tune of $500,000 versus 350. And so we felt it was appropriate for transparency's sake, to show the program as part of this net pay program increase so that we can publicly convey to you and to the general public that we are continuing, obviously, that pay program that went into effect in January of this year, which is that fire step and that police step, which is in blue and in red. The pay program, which is a new pay program, is close to $1.2 million, which we'll go through in a little bit. The baseline adjustments, those baseline adjustments are adjustments that take place due to new positions or adjustments in existing positions. So for example, on the right-hand side, we show how we're deleting some positions and adding some positions. And so some of those additions lead to a net increase in certain expenses. So for example, one of those positions is an assistant director in public works specific to utilities. And so you see that there's a green under the utility fund for $125,000. So that captures that adjustment of the addition of that position in there, if that makes any sense. Historically, Public Works had even up to 2 assistant directors. Currently, it has 0 assistant directors. And so after the freeze and after a lot of those things that happened, one of the adjustments that we identified was the need to have an assistant director over utilities. And so that position is one of the positions added and an example of what a baseline adjustment is. Another example of baseline adjustments are on the building and equipment services, which is that BES. And so 2 of these new positions are actually within that internal service fund. So the BESD project coordinator. And so as you know, it's a big priority for this administration to focus on our facilities, and especially with all the facility studies that we're undertaking, we know that that's going to lead to a lot of improvements and adjustments and just a lot of special projects associated with enhancing our facilities. And there is a need to have a project coordination component attached to our facilities. We're also adding custodial position within the Building and Equipment Services Department. So those 2 combined, attribute to that total of 129. So that's what baseline adjustments are. Now, as it relates to our overall FTE count, I will say that from our perspective, we're trying to do more with as much as the same level of employees as possible. For us, creating efficiencies is not just about creating existing efficiencies, but also being proactive and preventing future inefficiencies. And so from our perspective, the fact that we're able to eliminate 8 positions, add 8 positions, is a proactive way for us to be efficient. And so as each department goes through their budgets and there's a position impacted, you'll get to hear from them how that position was able to be reduced from the department and how that new position will add value to their department. Now, one of these positions, the deputy police chief position, that position is actually already in process. We actually already posted for that position and we're doing interviews. And I wanted to actually share with you one of our leading candidates. One of these leading candidates is a rookie, but he's ready and he's excited about the opportunity to interview for deputy chief. And I hope that he has a good chance at it. And so, so this is Michael Anthony Garza, and so we're very excited that he's entered into this world. And Chief Arredondo wasted no time in trying his recruitment efforts and gifted us this neat little onesie. And I think Angela deserves all the credit, right?
That's something.
Yeah. Anyway, I had to plug him in somehow, right?
You made it almost 30 minutes, so congratulations
Yeah,
on
thank you,
that.
thank you. All right. So one of the big things too that we'll break down is the increase in net transfers from the general fund to our CIP fund. I know that there's been conversation about in the last year, or even really, quite frankly, the 2 years that I've been here, there's been conversations with some of you about, what do we do with our excess funds? There's every year we budget X amount, but we don't always expend that much money. So what do we do with that balance? There's been conversations about, well, what are we doing with the loss of revenue funds that are coming from the Rescue Act funds? There's 1.5 million of that's going into general fund. There's been conversations with some of you about, okay, if sales tax comes in higher than anticipated, what do we do with that money? And so if we were to try and identify one place where we could say, that's where the loss of revenue money is, that's where that excess money is, that's where the savings money is, this is it. And I have a slide that shows you that. So in fiscal year 22, look at the difference in general fund transfers that we're making into our CIP program compared to the last 5 years. That's a significant difference. And that's what's allowing us to be able to have such a rich CIP program that's focused on residential streets, which I have another slide that showcases that as well, because we've heard you, we've heard the public, we recognize that residential streets is a big priority for council, and this is where it's at. And so if anybody ever asks, what does the city do with any of that money? Here it is. We're moving it from the general fund to the CIP as a one-time lump sum payment of over $8 million, which is the most we've done in the last 5 years, and I would argue probably ever. And that's what's allowing us to have a robust CIP program. That's what's allowing us to, for the first time, have a formal mill and overlay program for streets, which Ken will get into tomorrow. But this is where you could find that if you wanted to find it in one spot.
So is that in the CIP now?
Correct. So the CIP that we've presented you since December has already accounted for this.
Okay.
Probably could have done a better job of conveying that, in December, right? But we, for many months now, have already made decisions that there's no good in that money just staying in working balance, forever. We need to use that money. We obviously have a policy that requires 25% reserve for general fund, right? But 25% is plenty, right? We don't need to hover around 35%, right? Let's use the money for where it matters. And so we want to make sure that we put that money to good use. Now, I mentioned earlier on the residential streets, and so the current CIP program, which is close to $31 million, has close to $8 million attached to residential streets. I'm not going to go into the details because you have that program, and we had a whole meeting where we talked about it. But I merely want to point out the fact that the CIP is still very heavy infrastructure, and that's okay. We knew that going into it, it was going to take a little while to kind of create a more diverse portfolio for our CIP, especially since we're still going through master plans. But as you know, the process is better, it's in place. And so hopefully over the course of the next several years, we will create a more diversified portfolio. But for now, it's not a bad thing that we are continuing to invest a large percentage of our CIP dollars on residential streets, thoroughfare streets, drainage projects, utility projects, you name it. This is another chart to illustrate how rich our CIP program is for fiscal year 22. So you see that it totals $31 million, and you see how that is literally double what it was close to 5 years ago. And so that tells you that we've done a tremendous amount of work, and really Finance and Gilbert deserves all the credit in facilitating a program that allows us to be able to have larger CIP programs. As I mentioned, this one, of course, has that $7 million from UHV for that program. But even if we were to eliminate that UHV portion, the last 2 years, the fact that we've hovered around the mid-20s or low 20s is still a significant difference compared to previous years. And so we are doing more. And as I mentioned before, one of our challenges is how do we tell the story? How do we educate everybody so that hopefully everybody realizes that we are doing more? And so that's still a challenge, but we welcome that challenge. Already talked about the grants. I'm going to go through this somewhat quickly. So the compensation study, we actually started this in January of last year, and we hired a company, public sector personnel consultants, to come in and do this for us. For the benefit of everybody tuning into this, this study was about more than just compensation. We really needed to update our our status of exempt versus non-exempt designations. We really needed a review of our job descriptions. It was a very comprehensive analysis of our program. Now, obviously, a big part of it was the compensation piece. And this is just a list of a few cities and entities that we utilized in the study, or that the consultant utilized in the study for comparative sake. This is the timeline that shows when we started in January of last year and kind of where we are today. As I've already alluded to, we did a phase 1 for fire and PD that went into effect in January. That was completed in the fall. We're now completing the process for the remaining employees, which we're calling phase 2. So the proposed budget already accounts for close to $1.2 million for that phase 2. Now, little results overview real quick. One of the things that really came out pretty significantly in the study, mainly for police and fire because of the timing, because we were still in the thick of COVID, was that regardless of COVID, cities were moving forward. Many cities were continuing to increase pay for their employees, especially police and fire. And so there was no take a year off, for compensation. And so that was something that was somewhat of a surprise, but not too much of a surprise, because we recognize that other entities have collective bargaining for their police and fire, and so they're contractually obligated to continue to pay their employees regardless of everything else going on, right? But in any case, we recognize that there was some areas of opportunity for us, specifically as it related to senior police officers. You may recall a presentation I gave to Council 2 in the fall that very specifically singled out the fact that senior police officers were furthest behind market. We knew that on the top out part, we were also about 5% below market, so we've adjusted that. On the general population side, which is really the bulk of what's in the fiscal year 22 proposed budget, that's where we looked at the remaining employees, which is close to 380. And that was a very humbling result, because it told us that we had 60% of those employees that were below market. We had known for a while that we had employees across the organization that were underpaid in comparison to market, but we just didn't know to what extent. And so it was very humbling to see the data that backs up that over half of our employees that are not police and fire were behind market. And so for us, it was very important to develop a program that would at minimum get everybody to minimum of market. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with both of these phases. Phase 1 for police and fire, which went into effect in January, developed a whole new STEP program to begin with, but provided an increase of average for fire 4% and for police of 5% in order to get them to the nearest step. One of the challenges that still remains is based off of tenure. I think we all can recognize and realize that as these market ranges shift, and we're already behind, it's constantly ahead of us. And so for police and fire, we implemented a program that was close to $500,000, but we know that there's more work to be done, because the same challenge of, somebody here that's 5 or 10 years, making close to the same as somebody who starts tomorrow, that issue still needs to be addressed, but obviously it takes money to do that. And part of the reason why we want to try and leverage some of those property tax revenue funds that I alerted to earlier is to hopefully continue being able to focus on pay programs for police and fire and really everybody else over time as well, so that we can not only catch them up to minimum, but really place our individuals within the range or within the step that their experience warrants. And hopefully that help our retention and recruitment. Phase 2, which we're proposing going into effect in October, I mentioned the close to 380 positions that are part of general population. Only 60% of those, or 292, are proposed to receive an increase. As part of that study and the recommendations, we are officially proposing increasing our full-time minimum wage from $11 to $13. We recognize that this is something that we need to constantly be proactive about, because as private sector continues to increase their minimum wage, we need to be cognizant of that. And so we want to make sure that we can keep up with the local demand for workforce, and this is a way that we can do that. And I can probably confidently say too that by making this shift to $13 an hour would put us at the forefront of the various public entities in terms of minimum wage in our community, and so I think that's something that we can be proud of as well. In terms of what happens after that, as I've already alluded to it, both first phases don't address the tenure aspect of employees and their experience, and it also leaves out close to 150 employees that will not receive an increase either through phase one or through phase two. Now, the majority of those, close to 85%, have received some adjustment to their salary over the course of the last few years, simply based off of, adjustments to their position title or shifting from one department to another department, whatever the case may be. And so, but regardless, there'd still be 154 employees that would not see an increase due to the results of this study, even though they might have seen a minor adjustment for other reasons. And so that's something that we want to be cognizant of going into fiscal year 23. You've heard me say that I'm not a fan of across-the-board increases when we have so much disparity throughout the organization. So I think beginning in fiscal year 23 would be a good opportunity to bring back conversations about doing cost of living adjustments across the board. Since at that point, while it's not perfect because it's not based off of tenure yet, at minimum we would have a lot of folks closer to where they need to be. Any questions on that? No? Okay. 3 more slides. Really quick on the health fund, I simply want to convey that we don't envision any changes to premiums for employees. I know that this has been a topic that is obviously very sensitive to employees, and you may recall that we made a decision to properly fund the employer part of the contribution, which now has caused our working capital balance to trend in the right direction. And so you'll see that FY 2019, we hit bottom, if you will, meaning our lowest point, and you could see how that's beginning to rebound. And so that's a positive news. That's what's allowing us to be able to not have to make any adjustments to premiums for our employees. The other thing that I do want to point out, which we specifically singled out, was the retirees. And so for the pre-65 retirees, if we were to look and compare 21 to 16, though that claim amount has doubled practically. And so I know that over the years, there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of work that staff has done to try and mitigate the impact of retirees. But I think that's a conversation that needs to continue because, again, the data is showing that those expenditures are increasing as well. And you'll notice that overall it's decreasing, which is the yellowish mustard color. I think it's appropriate to mention that we've seen a significant decrease in the number of employees that use our health plan. Up until 2013, we actually required every employee to be on our health plan. And so since then, that number has diminished. And especially when we went to the high deductible plans, we saw a swing of over 100 employees not being on our plan. And so while you see the claims for general population decrease for employees, we could attribute that to the fact that we're just not covering as many, employees, or not as many employees are part of the plan. But nevertheless, it's a good positive story that the working capital balance for the health fund is increasing in the right direction. So no changes to the health plan, so that's good news. And everything else I could skip minus this. I did want to briefly show you the budget wheel comparison from fiscal year 21 to 22 for the general fund. This very clearly shows a couple of things. One, it shows the increase in public works, which is that increase in transfers to the CIP that I mentioned. And so again, we've heard the citizens, we've heard you, more money for streets, more money for streets. So we've done that. And so that's why you see that public works part of the pie has increased. Even though percentage-wise, public safety has decreased, the money amount has increased slightly. And so let's not get caught up in the percentage piece there. And you'll get to hear from police and fire today. And really that's the big story from the general fund, is the fact that our transfer to CIP is significant enough to make our public works part of the pie that much more significant. So with that, I can cut my presentation short because everything else will come after that. If there aren't any questions, I'll go specifically into the city manager story. We can exit this and just go to that if you want. I assume it's like one of the first ones up here. There we go. So very quickly, this is what every department head's going to go through, and so I'll walk you through that. And so every department will briefly go through a department description. I hope everybody is aware that the responsibility of the city manager's office is to incorporate the policies that come from council, as well as focus on running an efficient operation, and obviously overseeing all of the staff and the personnel. A lot of the departments will share with you a organizational chart, and this is where they'll probably talk about some of the changes that are coming in their respective departments. In the city manager's office specifically, I only want to bring to your attention a couple things. One of them is associated with utility billing office under CFO. You may recall that we have slowly but surely increased the number of operations that report directly to the city manager's office, which is now possible because we have two assistant city managers, and we have the CFO as part of the executive leadership team as well. One of the things that we also learned after the freeze was the critical role that the utility billing office plays in the software aspect of not only the city, but the residents, keeping tabs of their water accounts, leaks, things of that sort. And so Gilbert is spearheading a complete revamp to that program. And so we wanted to show it in the organizational chart that utility billing reports directly to the city manager's office through the CFO. Historically, utility billing office had been part of the Public Works Department. And so this now makes it to where it's more front and center. You may recall that I also sometimes talk about eliminating zeros. And so now Gilbert wakes up worrying about the utility billing office, and that helps. The other small change to this was that we officially incorporated, I don't show it in the organizational chart for previous fiscal years, is the Emergency Management Office. So we all know that it's a city-county department, but because on paper it's a county department, it's easy to kind of operationally forget that it's there, but it obviously plays a critical role. And especially through the pandemic, we realized that yes, it needs to be front and center. So as minimal as it may seem, I wanted to convey to you that it is more front and center. And so that's obviously right under my purview there. The Economic Development Director position that's vacant, that was funded this year, still in the works in terms of trying to fill. One of the things that I want to briefly talk to you about is the addition of a special projects manager. And so one of the things that has come up really since I started, and some of you may recall even during my interview, was this desire to have a more formalized performance management program, but we really don't have anybody that owns it or owns the development of it, or even just the maintenance or the keeping up of the performance management program. We now have a software that helps facilitate that. And so we want to incorporate the concept of a special projects manager within the organization by first doing it within the city manager's office, having this individual focus on developing a formalized metrics program. One of the things that we've identified as an executive leadership team is that we have a lot of positions in the organization that are administrative in nature. There might be clerks, administrative assistants, things of that sort. But we'd like to have more professional folks within the organization, right? The folks with a college degree, with a master's degree. You don't need to be a supervisor to be able to be an exempt employee, to be able to contribute. And so we want to try and do a better job of having more diversity within our workforce, of having executives, managers, but also professionals, right? As well as administrative assistants. And so this is one way that we want to try and do that. The executive assistant position is actually now one, and is actually listed as an example for us as a efficiency, where now an executive assistant is going to be providing support for both legal and city manager's office, as opposed to each of us having an administrative assistant. We felt that was an appropriate shift. And Thomas and April will talk a little bit more about how that makes sense on their part.
Could you go back? You're still moving the wrong direction. I have a question on the chart up a little higher. I see some changes. Is this just sort of for information, or is this actually the chart? The city secretary is now under the city manager where it used to be, and then it moved and it was under legal.
It's been in city secretary since I got here.
Has it? Okay, I guess I'm I've forgotten. And then, like, you've got police department, and then you've got fire. Is that fire's under the police department, communications reports to fire? Or these are all, it's just drawn that way?
Right, so this is intended to reflect that police, fire, communications, HR, city secretary, emergency management, economic development report directly to me.
Okay,
Under Derek, you have IT, building and equipment services, municipal court, CVB, and library. Under Mike, you have Parks and Rec, Public Works, CIP, Planning and Development Services, Environmental Services / Community Appearance, and the Main Street Program. Under Gilbert, you have Finance, Budget, Purchasing, Utility Billing Office, and Grants Administrator. So this is simply intended to show that this group of individuals report to that specific person.
okay, all right. And then within the budget that you presented to us, there are pieces of this chart, but that's what they are, they're just pieces, and I guess we haven't gotten there yet, but I got to finance, and it starts out with the Assistant Director of Finance. And I thought,
Correct.
and it looked like that was a freestanding position and then on down, but,
Right,
But
and that's
it-
because
they're just
Gilbert
pieces.
is CFO / Finance Director.
right,
And we officially moved Gilbert to be part of the city manager's office.
Okay.
And so under the finance department budget, it starts with the assistant director.
and is there, but that person reports to somebody,
He reports to Gilbert
okay,
as labeled here. Finance Wesley reports to
Right.
Gilbert.
okay.
On some of the goals and objectives, we've tried to attach the goals and objectives for every department to attach to 2035, as well as the specifics that council approved in terms of the council action priority items that you approved in January. So where applicable, we've tried to apply those there. We're also have tried to highlight some of the successes from fiscal year 21, simply just as a brief recap to annual reports, because again, this is going to be accessible to the public. So we want to make sure that everybody recognizes the things that have been accomplished. Obviously, within the city manager's office, you all know firsthand that Derek and Mike have done a tremendous job over the course of last year on broadband and some of the workforce housing. Obviously, we've done a lot as it relates to economic development with a lot of the retail and new projects that are scheduled to kick off here this year. And so we just want to kind of include those and add those as a reminder to everybody on some of the things that we're very proud of in the city manager's office. You'll see too that, as I mentioned earlier, there'll be a section for efficiencies. So every department will have some efficiencies. We'll briefly talk a little bit about some of the new programs. In some cases, they're more robust than others. For us specifically, we know that we still have work to do as it relates to workforce housing. We know that we have work to do on the economic development front. We have work to do on the broadband initiative in terms of the implementation side of the house. And obviously, if the budget gets approved and we're able to add the special projects manager, then a big part of my focus in fiscal year 22 would be working on establishing this formalized performance management program. And so with that, some of the budget impacts for the city manager's office are related to really two things. One is the phase 2 impact for the compensation study, which specifically for the city manager's office impacts the executive assistant. And then the $56K for the special projects manager. Now, we did do a reduction for the economic development director position, and so we've since we haven't hired the position yet, we've actually slashed that budget that we had attributed to that. And so really the only net increase to the city manager's office for fiscal year 22 is $27,000 or 2.5% on the personnel cost. Now, every department is going to have this, and just to give you an example of how this works, if you wanted to kind of see it in more detail, you could click personnel costs, and you could see exactly where all that goes to. For example, we've added the ICMA retirement part to be consistent with my employment agreement. You'll see maintenance and operations. If you wanted to drill down to learning more specifics on all of these categories, you could. Obviously, there's not much in these categories in the city manager's office, but in other departments there are. But it can get pretty detailed and pretty easy to navigate.
If you wanted an overall instead of departmental for, say, workers' comp, how do you roll that up for the entire city?
For workers' compensation, that's a good question. Is it possible to do that?
Yeah, we can set up a view for it that would allow you to look at each of those by account, specific accounts, if there's ones that you're interested in.
Well, I'm not saying workers' comp per se, but any of these, if I wanted to say, okay, I want to see what health insurance costs for all employees, and it rolls it up instead of having to go to each department and pulling those numbers out. But what's it look like as an organization?
But like I said, we would have, in order to do that, the way the system works, we'd have to set up a view for it, but we can work that out to where y'all would be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So in some departments, the next section will have both expenses and revenues. And so one of the neat things about this new software is that it helps facilitate showing revenues where applicable. I don't have any specific revenues specific to the city manager's office, so I don't have that section in my story. But April, when she goes through hers, she'll be the first department to go through that will go through this that has it. So keep an eye out for that. This is just another way to show the same information that's up here. And so here, for instance, if anybody wanted to see, what the breakdown was in the city manager's office, if you wanted to see, again, percentage-wise or how much money was going towards payroll versus, Social Security versus TMRS, I mean, you could really kind of drill down into it. And again, and in some categories, it's easier to do than city manager's office doesn't have a lot of line items. But anyway, but it's there. No department's gonna go in detail through the rest of their story, but for transparency's sake, we've added information related to describing each positions within those departments. We've also attached lists of recommended versus not recommended, and so if anybody wanted to see exactly what the requests were from the department and what was recommended, what was not recommended, that was one of the big things that Raleigh really wanted to get a better understanding of, was understanding, what our department's requesting, what are the needs, and even if we can't fund the needs, he wanted to be very transparent with what those needs were. And so we have that section that helps capture all that. But fortunately, the majority of requests we were able to fund, but nonetheless, that's in that part of the story. And really, that's it. And so very quickly, we can go, yes, sir.
I have two questions, and I was going to wait until everybody does their presentations, but the compensation study, was turnover taken into account? Were there certain jobs where turnover is higher than others? Did it work its way into the compensation study somewhere?
Sure, yeah. So on the implementation side, that's where you mean your comment. We are not. We simply just very strictly said, those 60% employees that are behind market, we're proposing to get those 60% employees to a minimum of market, regardless of what department they're in, regardless of the turnover rate in that position. That was our approach to it. Now, if you were to say, we don't have $1.2 million to go towards that pay program, we only have $600,000, and we had to find a different way to allocate a smaller amount of money, well, then at that point, we could look at things like turnover rates and say, okay, we don't have enough money to actually fund everybody the minimum of market, so let's think of other ways to do it. But we're proposing funding those 60% of positions to minimum of market, so there was no need to take any other viewpoint to how we spread it out.
How much money, is there money from the American Recovery Act in the general fund budget, and how much?
The only amount that would be in there would be loss of revenue, which is $1.5 million.
Okay. Which means that there's 13 million left?
Yes, and as we've discussed, we are accounting for roughly $3 million to go towards loss of revenue. 1.5 of that is for general fund, but we have utility fund,
Right.
multi-tax fund, VSTDC, several funds that we're taking that. And we currently are open for proposals on how to use about $10 million of that, but ultimately it'll be up to council. We intentionally did not include any additional Rescue Act funds into the budget yet because we knew that council wanted to have a more robust discussion about it. So for example, we've discussed and have recommended adding some grant staff, for example. That's not even included in the proposed budget yet. So if you were to go back and look at the slide where I say like new positions, we don't even have them listed there yet because we want to come back and have a separate conversation with you on the Rescue Act funds.
Let me clarify something. There's a rescue fund and a recovery fund. Aren't they two different acts? The rescue fund was a previous one. This is the American Recovery Act, or am I, do I?
You're
not-
talking about the recent one, correct?
The recent one's the American Recovery Act, right?
I'm calling it
But
Rescue
there
Act,
was a
but
COVID-19 previous
Yeah.
American Rescue Fund.
I think we're both talking about the recent one.
Okay,
So,
Okay.
but yes, that's the one that I'm talking about.
okay,
And we don't have any we've already
yeah.
utilized the first.
So you said you don't have the grants person in that, so you're envisioning that grants person just during the time that we have these grants? That would be a permanent, a full-time but temporary position?
Yeah, it would have to start off as a temp,
Okay,
but that's something that we're still trying to flesh out. But realistically, with these funds, since we have until the end of 2024, I mean,
right.
this could be a multi-year type of position that would be funded through the Rescue Act funds. And during that process, Gilbert and I have already discussed, and with Katie as well, assessing, whether that's something that we need to plan for long-term to keep, or whether it's not. Now, if we assess that it's something that makes sense to add long-term, we would internally follow a process similar to how we do with the COPS grant, where we would say, okay, in fiscal year 23, we're going to fund, 33% of it. In fiscal year 24, the other 33%. And then fiscal year 25, if we wanted to keep it, we'll fund the rest of it, right? So we could be strategic in how we grow into keeping that position permanent if we decided that there was value in that. But we're not there yet. Any other questions? Okay. So like I said, every department's going to go through that. I had told everybody I would take 30 minutes and I took an hour. So at this point, we'll probably be here till
Your
Thursday.
department didn't take very long.
When you go to finance, when you go through,
Your
okay,
department didn't take very long, just if we're keeping
yeah.
things straight.
All right, so next up will be Thomas. Please don't take an hour like I did.
Y'all want to give us y'all's time limit before you start this time?
I don't
Could you
know.
set on the
being
clock?
being out of work for 3 weeks really threw my sense of time off.
Good evening, Chairman Pro Tem Bucknight and members of council. Somebody had to say that tonight, so I go for that. All right. This is the legal department budget. We are a much smaller budget than many of the departments in the city, so this should be fairly quick. But I do have some interesting data to share with you, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to share our department's story with you. The department's description is simply that the city attorney's office functions as an in-house legal services department for the city of Victoria. In addition to prosecuting criminal cases in municipal court, we also review contracts and other documents for the city. We give general legal advice to all of the departments in the city. We prepare all of the resolutions and ordinances for council consideration and provide other legal services as necessary to all departments of the city and boards and commissions of the city. We have a very broad service base. James? Yeah, scroll wheel is not doing anything.
Man, that mouse doesn't like you.
It really does not. Here's my organizational chart. You can see it's significantly smaller than the city manager's office organizational chart. There are 3 of us in my office, myself, city attorney Thomas Gush, deputy city attorney Allison Lacey, and the assistant city attorney Ruby Boone. That is a slight reorganization from what you may have seen if I had done this presentation last year. In fact, the theme of my presentation is that we have significantly revamped the legal department over the last 12 months, and we'll be continuing to try to refine that revamp over the course of the next several months. And hopefully by the time we begin fiscal year 2021 in October, all of that will be in place. Our department mission is to reduce legal exposure for the city by providing sound legal advice without unnecessary administrative burden. It is my goal to remove loopholes where I can. I tell every new attorney that comes into my office, it is not our job to create hoops for people to jump through. It's our job to point out the hoops that already exist and to help our clients get through them. Fiscal year 2021 highlights, as I mentioned, we restructured our entire department. When Katie Connolly was promoted from legal assistant in my department to our grants administrator, rather than backfilling that with another legal assistant, I came to you guys and you all approved restructuring my department to convert that into another attorney in my office by bringing in the contract part-time prosecutor that we had. Later in the year, when I had a vacancy in my administrative assistant position, I proposed to Jesus that we move that position out of my office into the city secretary's office. I'll let her explain what she's going to do with that position, and that the city manager office and I would share an administrative assistant. That's allowing us to add some capacity in the city secretary's office without increasing overall headcount citywide. And I think it's going to be a good operation for upstairs of City Hall to have one unified administrative assistant. I'm looking forward to that. Additionally, in 2021, as you know, we added the legislative program. We reviewed well over 2,000 bills that were filed at the state legislature, tracked 230 of them that could impact our operations, and we engaged at the Capitol on over 25 bills. It was, I think, a very effective program. I'm looking forward to coming back to you with a wrap-up of that program in the next month. Every department is going to have some performance metrics, and I have a table of numbers at the top, but those of you who know me know that I'm wordy, not numbery. I prefer the squiggly line charts to the number tables, so I'm going to start there. The blue squiggly line on that chart represents the workload of the city attorney's office going back to 1997, and the orange line is our budget over the same time frame. Where those two lines intersect in 2011 is the first budget that I prepared as city attorney. So it's been my focus to maintain a steady or declining budget, even in the face of wildly increasing workload. Now, when you see that line taking off like a rocket towards the end, I really do want to point out the legal department does not create workload within the city. We are responding to workload that other departments are also experiencing. Every contract that we're writing in the legal department is because Public Works or Development Services or some other department is doing something. And so that exponential, nearly exponential increase in workload over the last several years, you might consider to be a reflection of what the city as a whole is doing. Now, because we have managed to streamline a lot of our work through technological efficiencies, adding software. A lot of that increase in workload over the last 2 or 3 years has been borne by our administrative staff, not our attorney staff. I want to show you another chart that looks specifically at attorney workload over the last 5 years. And it has increased dramatically over the last 5 years. In fact, it has almost doubled in 5 years. But it is not the same exponential increase that you're seeing when we include the administrative staff in that. The reason I put both of those charts up there is because beginning with next fiscal year, we won't have administrative staff. All of those other workloads have been transitioned into other locations. And so what this second chart is really what we're seeing going forward in my department. And it looks like that curve is flattening because the 2021 year there includes the legislative session, 2022. I'm a decade off for some reason. 2022 will not be a legislative year. And so I'm projecting that curve to flatten a little bit in the next year, but then increase the following year.
Mr. Goosh?
Yes, sir.
Since 97, have we always had a full-time attorney?
Yes.
Yes.
We have always had at least one full-time attorney in the city attorney's office. We've, I think during that period, always had at least 2 attorneys. When I started in 2009, there were 2 attorneys, the city attorney and an assistant city attorney. I know that at some points prior to that, around 2006, 2007 timeframe, there were 3 attorneys. The office has been as large as 5 or 6 people historically in that window of time that you see there. But in the time that I've been here, it's only recently that it's begun to change.
Thank you.
Sure. Going back up to the chart, I do want to point out the chart because you're going to look at it later online and you're going to wonder about this big zero over here on the right-hand side. You notice that for my estimate of 2022 workloads, there are significant reductions in claims for and against the city and Public Information Act requests. That's not because I'm not expecting there to be claims filed against the city. It's because we have relocated that workflow out of my office into the Safety Division of the HR department. Likewise, the Public Information Act requests are in the process of transitioning out of my office. I still anticipate about 100 of those files will need legal review, but the vast majority of those files can be managed without an attorney being involved with them. Departmental efficiencies, just a couple of things I want to point out here. The first paragraph talks about our technological efficiencies over the last several years transitioning into practice management technology that has really helped us work remotely. I am happy to say, just providentially, prepared for the pandemic. When it came along, we each grabbed our laptops and we were able to do 90+% of our work from home remotely, and that was a huge benefit for us. This year, you see the second paragraph describing the partnership with the city manager's office to combine our executive assistant position, and I think that's going to be a great efficiency for the city overall. Now, we get to start looking forward to 2022. We're going to continue to refine the vertical integration realignment of our department. I'm not going to say that we're done with that process yet. We continue to spot places where we could refine things here and there. We also implemented recently a client satisfaction survey that is going to be expanded in the coming year, and we've used that process to drive our goals over the following calendar year. So that's something we're looking forward to getting continued feedback on. We're also expanding training opportunities for city departments, including Open Meetings Act training for boards and commissions. We've got a legislative impact training that's coming up very soon for all departments, and then targeted training throughout the organization as needed, including such things as transitioning to the municipal court or other things that may come up. The legislative program that we started last year will continue this year, and we're going to transition into reviewing our successes this year and planning a more proactive program for future legislative sessions. I've been talking about that a lot, converting from a reactive program that we had this past session to a more proactive program. I'm already beginning that proactivity. I have reached out to the University of Houston, Victoria. We're implementing a program for some directed research project for a junior or senior level student within the political science department there. One of the things that I've discovered is that there is no best practices plan for how a city should do a legislative program. The director of legislative work in Corpus Christi told me today, it's just kind of all in my head. And that's what I've discovered pretty much statewide as I have talked to cities and said, how do you run your program and what ideas can I steal from you? And so working with the University of Houston, Victoria, we want to create a research project to develop that best practices guide to figure out how we should plan our program. Theoretically, that research will be done during the fall, looking to get a paper written by the end of the fall semester so that we can use that next calendar year. And then, of course, I also have up there the Charter Review Committee that will be working this fall. Budget highlights, I'm going to skip over the bullets there to scroll straight down into the costs here because this is really where it's all detailed. The personnel costs you can see after you restructure all of the various different positions in my department and then apply the pay program, it works out to an actual net decrease of about $10,000 or 2.34% variance year over year. The maintenance and operations budget also, as you go through those lines, there's not a large degree of variance in most of those sections. I do want to point out the other charges line towards the bottom of that table, and I'll expand on that one so you can see where that 18.57% increase is coming from. And really, that's in educational development. That's adding a new attorney, and we have required CLEs, so I had to add some money in there for additional training of an attorney. And then subscriptions and memberships is where our Texas Bar Association dues are filed. So you see that increasing for another attorney as well. So that's the bulk of that change. Other than that, our our budget is largely flat. It does not have significant increases in any of our lines. You can see that visually. The middle three columns here are the current budget, original, amended, and then projected budget for the current year. And then here on the right is the proposed budget for 2022. And the vast majority of our money obviously is in personnel costs. I'll answer any questions you may have for me. All right, thank you. Next up, we have the city secretary. I'll stall a little bit to give her a chance to walk up here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll begin speaking on my budget. There's a little bit detailed department description there, just to kind of go over vaguely what we do in my office. We are the official repository of permanent documents. We transcribe and preserve minutes for the council, the STDC, and the Victoria Housing Finance Corporation. We also maintain the titles and licenses of all city equipment and vehicles. We serve as the official records manager for the city and the sole registrar for Victoria County. So we review, file, and preserve all birth and death records for the County of Victoria. We issue a variety of licenses, administer the city elections, and we compile the agendas now and for the city council and a few other city boards and commissions. And we will begin to administer the public information request process very soon, as Thomas alluded to in his presentation. So those last two are fairly new for our office. Our organizational chart is small as well. So it currently includes myself and my assistant city secretary. Currently, we have one administrative assistant 3 position, and we are in the process of adding an additional position. We'll talk a little bit later when we talk about the efficiencies in our department. So our mission of the city secretary's office is to support the government transparency by recording and maintaining all official city documents and city council and legislative actions to provide courteous and knowledgeable customer service to all citizens and staff and fulfill all responsibilities of office in a professional manner. So the goals for our office are to continue to obtain the exemplary 5-star award from the Texas Vital Statistics Unit of the Department of State Health Services by meeting or exceeding the qualifications as outlined for that award, to provide a level of customer service that exceeds the quality or the expectations of our citizens, and to administer an election that will result in a council that supports the city's growth through the comprehensive plan, and to provide support for the city council, management, and staff concerning the comprehensive plan to maintain those documents and access for historical purposes. So just a couple of pictures of the ladies in my office. So our budget highlights for 2021. So we did successfully implement COVID-19 protocols, such as the glass barriers in our office to provide continued service to customers throughout the pandemic. We did earn the Department of State Health Services 5-star award for 2020. We also earned the Texas Municipal Clerks Association Achievement of Excellence Award for effective and efficient management of resources. We haven't actually officially announced that in council. We just received the award, and we will be doing that soon here. We did begin the administration of city council agenda process, as I spoke about earlier, and administration of the iCompass software, which we use for agenda management. And then we will begin that public information request process as well. And we successfully administered the May 2021 election and look forward to the July elections and possible runoff. So the performance matrix for my office are a little different than many of the departments that you'll see later on. The things that are easy for us to have metrics on are going to be the minutes that we administer for the different boards and commissions that we take care of. Our garage sale permits are a big thing for us. We also do the vital records registration. So that was increased last year over in 2020. We did see an increase in the registering of death certificates due to the pandemic. So that impacted our office. And other than that, they usually remain pretty steady throughout the years. The number that we issue, also the number that we that we register. So we did see a decrease last year in the certified copies that we issued due to the pandemic because not so many people weren't traveling. Many kids didn't need it to register for school because they chose homeschool, things like that. So the efficiencies that we spoke about earlier, so after shifting the responsibilities for the agenda and the management of that software, as well as the that we will begin to change over the public information request process to the city secretary's office, we shifted one legal full-time employee, the administrative position in Thomas's office, to the city secretary's office to help maintain our level of customer service, to provide operational efficiency while taking over those other processes. So we also have begun cross-training employees so that we can maintain that level of service while still picking up the additional duties. So our new programs for 2022, our new initiatives. We are continuing to file and issue vital records in our office in accordance with the regulations of the state. We have enhanced administration of a citywide records management program that we're going to look forward to developing with the additional position we have in our office. We feel we'll have additional time to devote to records management, and the increased training for our iCompass, which is the agenda management software. So we're hoping to streamline those processes and provide some additional training for the other city departments. And then we're going to continue to train our staff for a high level of customer service. And then we have a records preservation project that we're going to do to protect, maintain, and digitize the late 1800s and early 1900s vital statistic ledger books. And that's, since I've been city secretary, we haven't done anything like that. And as long as I've been at the city for 12 years, we haven't done a project that helped maintain those books. So we're looking forward to that. It'll be a multi-year project. It's very expensive to, to maintain those books. And so look at that. And the other format, again, the biggest expense or addition in our office is going to be that personnel cost because of the additional employee as well as the compensation study. Other than that, very minor changes. The minor changes in supplies, maintenance, the other cost here, because of adding an additional employee and some additional responsibilities, we had to add a little bit for educational development so we can make sure that we maintain, especially in the public information request department, that we have the training to do that properly. And the expenses for the city secretary's office here are the same type of chart that you saw from Thomas and Mr. Garza concerning the different expenses in our office. So you have one of the smaller budgets as well, as Thomas mentioned. And our office also has revenues. So it's a little bit changed, a different chart that's added in there for the revenues. So we'll go over those a little bit. This is a comparison chart of the revenues versus the expenses or the budget. You can roll over it to see the different things here, but also if you click here, and the different colors represent the different types of funds that we collect in our office. So like, for instance, you can see here that the largest amount of revenue that we collect in my office is for liquor license, the city portion only of liquor license. You pay city, county, and state fees for liquor license, but this is just the city only portion. And then the next largest would be our vital statistics. We do the vital statistics is in two different categories here. Vital statistics labeled here would be for the local birth and death records that we issue. And the one under remote here would be the birth records that we issue from the state database for any record, for any birth record from across the state. So, and you can also sort this here. It will default to sort by chart of account, but you can also sort it A to Z or large to small, just for a different view if you prefer to see which one we have the most revenue or the least revenue of. So that administrative assistant 3 position is listed here that we are currently in the process of hiring for. So we were able to shift the funds in this year's budget from the legal office to my office to begin that hiring process. There is a high-level description of the different jobs in my office, as well as the the proposed and recommended and not recommended lists here. So does anybody have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, April.
Well, good evening, council. I'm going to be going over the finance department this evening. So the finance department consists of 7 employees with duties including accounts payable and accounts receivable processing, general ledger postings, budget development, grant administration, and cash management, among others. We also oversee the purchasing and print shop departments, as well as now the utility billing office. In our goals, we strive to provide high-level debt management practices, provide accurate and timely financial reports, seek new technology and software to improve process efficiency, such as the OpenGov software, and work towards award recognition for our annual financial report and our annual budget. So in fiscal 21 highlights, in the later part of fiscal 20 during COVID, we had added a grant administrator position in order to help with the multiple COVID grant opportunities the city received, as well as to pursue future grants for capital projects, public safety grants, and other organizational and community needs. So in fiscal 2021, some of the highlights, the city had secured multiple grants, but most notably the Duck Pond Grant with the Texas Parks and Wildlife, as well as a beautification grant through TxDOT. We've also implemented a new software for budget development and reporting, which is OpenGov. Like I mentioned before, we've taken over oversight of the utility billing office. And then we've also received awards for our budget and for our annual financial report for the 36th and 40th years consecutive, 36th and 40th consecutive years respectively. And our performance metrics, probably the highlight here is our debt rating. So we've maintained our AA debt rating for our general fund debt and the AA minus for our revenue bonds, which we are striving to get that revenue bond rating increased to AA this year. All right. Then our departmental efficiencies. This would include the implementation of the OpenGov budget and reporting application. This has helped us streamline the budget development processes for the departments. We've managed to produce this proposed budget tonight within OpenGov in tandem with the implementation and training process, and of course anticipate to further improve efficiencies in future fiscal years as everything now is being just set up this first year. Let's see, our finance specialists, we've got them both fully cross-trained to perform both accounts receivable and accounts payable functions. This allows us to have a continuity of internal service in the absence of one or the other. We also reorganized the finance and purchasing department to now have our budget manager position is titled the budget and procurement manager. And this has helped increase the efficiency and quality of the competitive solicitation process for the city. For fiscal 22, we'll continue implementing the OpenGov software and using the application to its full potential by developing our quarterly reports, as well as setting up dashboards for users to view the financial and non-financial data, as well as being able to link the live data from our accounting system into these reports, which will be on the website. This effort will increase financial transparency and help the city to achieve recognition through the Texas Comptroller's Transparency Stars program. So in fiscal 22, budget highlights, our personnel costs are increasing $41,000. This is primarily due to the implementation of phase 2 of the compensation plan study. Our other charges are going up about $700 due to an increase in membership costs. And then our capital outlay is budgeted at $8,000 this year, and that consists of replacement of 4 computers with laptops and docking stations. And Councilman Bachmeier, you had the question about looking at health expenses, so I'll show you how to do that, because I was thinking of something else, but you can actually do it with the individual expense items. So I'm looking at the budget overview.
Okay.
And if you go into the expense piece of it, what you'll do here, so click expenses, you'll just uncheck this amount. And you kind of have to find it, but if you know what the account number is, you can type it in here and find it. So I'll just drill into health and accident insurance, and this will bring up the chart here so you can see it split up between the governmental funds and proprietary funds. And we can change the view here just to see the bar graph this way so you can kind of see a more historical perspective of it. But that's how you would do that. You could do that for any expense account, any revenue account.
Okay, great, thank you.
And that's all I have. If there are any questions.
Thank you.
Cutting, Cheryl. I know, no cutting over there.
We're going to take a break here about 6:45.
Sounds good. I'll be quick. All right. Good evening, council. I'm excited to be here this evening to talk to y'all more about purchasing as opposed to just talking about what type of solicitation method we're using. So there's quite a bit of exciting things going on in purchasing. Purchasing right now, we have 3 staff members. We have our purchasing supervisor and 2 procurement specialists. And the mission of our purchasing department is to be proactive leaders in identifying innovative solutions to enable the city to accomplish their goals and provide quality service to our internal departments and citizens more effectively and efficiently. Purchasing, we go out and we procure goods. So that's really our main goal, is to get the best value for the city and our citizens and other staff departments. Our goals for this coming up fiscal year is to continue to use our electronic bid system, which is BidNet, to secure or solicit any bids, as well as continue assisting city staff in securing these bids and quotes. Not everything is solicited, where you go out for advertisement. There's some stuff that's low dollar amounts. We'd like to go out and help other departments get those bids out there. BidNet is just a good resource, that electronic site.
Is that buy board?
That's a co-op. It's kind of similar, but not. BidNet is where we say we're looking for X amount of PVC pipe for water department. So we'll get different bids from Ferguson and other vendors, and then we can get the low bidder out there. But it's a free site, so people can sign up and get those notifications.
Okay.
We have also started quarterly training for city staff on procurement. Like I said, it's not just, getting the 3 quotes, different methods, different ways that we can do things where we can get that best value for the city. We're also working on updating the procurement manual to meet the city needs. We've kind of had that shift from just low price over, trying to best value. So we're trying to update our manual that this way it meets what our needs are now, as well as cross-training employees in their new roles. I mentioned we have 3 staff members. All 3 are new to the roles that they haven't been there like 3 months. So all of these employees are new in those roles. So there's a lot of cross-training going on, learning the way we do things here in this city. Some highlights for 21. We've completed the integration of our warehouse inventory to 700 Main. Y'all may recall we used to be out at Pine Street, the purchasing department, and we've relocated to the print shop here at 700 Main. So we've completed that integration, as well as we began using Government Code 2269 for solicitations in order to get, again, that best value for the city. As well as, like I said, we promoted 3 city employees from within, so they're all doing new duties, new responsibilities. So that is a big coup for us, as well as we began using some solicitation templates in order to streamline the solicitation process. Now we have a good base start-off point, and then we send it out to the departments and kind of clean up for what their needs are for that particular project. We've also implemented quarterly training for departments. We meet quarterly with different departments, go over the laws, any new updates, kind of, again, the co-ops, any new things for them. We do it one-on-one. I feel we get a better reception from the departments when we can talk one-on-one with them. So we're going to continue. We've implemented that this year, and we'll continue that next year. Another highlight is we updated our quick reference card. It's just a real quick high level of dollar limits, things you need to meet as far as when you need quotes, your hub requirements, council approval, things like that. Here's just a matrix of our purchasing department. If you can see right here, these are our POs created. So over the last 3 years, we average about 1,000 POs just coming out of our office. Another item I wanted to show at show is the solicitations prepared. In 2020, we issued 35 solicitations. This year, we're on track to issue 47. Oops. And then next year, we're on track to issue 50 solicitations. Some efficiencies, like Wesley mentioned, we reorganize a purchasing manager position to oversee budget and purchasing now. So that has helped to increase our efficiency within finance and purchasing, as well as we've implemented what we call an intake form. It's just a form that has all the important information for the solicitation: project name, budget, contact, who's our staff contact, when we're advertising, things like that. It's very helpful for us in the department when we're creating those solicitations. Some new initiatives for fiscal year '22. We're going to begin contract management with our purchasing supervisor. He's going to kind of oversee that for the city. There's some contracts where we all get busy and they may get close to expiring, and then we're in a mad dash to get a new contract, get a solicitation out. So we're going to start managing that in the purchasing department to try to help and ease. This way we know, hey, we're 3 months ahead. We need to get something in line. Let's get that solicitation going. That hadn't been done before, so we're going to implement that starting in fiscal year '22. As well as we're going to create an annual procurement guide for staff. Again, just kind of to help in planning, foresight, know what projects we have coming up, to schedule them out. And again, we're going to continue with our quarterly training for other departments. The budget highlights: our purchasing department is pretty small. The main increase, or rather decreases in personnel, we do have how much is it? 4,000 for our compensation plan. But like I said, we have 3 new employees, so that baseline adjustment is in there. So it's a reduction to our personnel, but there is some compensation plan study money in there for our employees. And the other major increase, if you look, it's here in our advertisement. I mentioned, we were at 35 in 20, 47 this year. We're expected to hit 50. That's just what we have now. So we added some more funds in the budget for our advertisement costs. And that's all I have on purchasing. If there's any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I was so excited, I was ready to cut off Laura. Come up here and talk about the HR and safety departments. So, good evening. I will make this quick. I know we have a deadline of 6:45, so I'll go fast. My department, similar type of flow with regards to the organizational chart. Myself, our human resources manager, Wanda North, recruitment specialist, Lindsay Chavez, training development specialist, I'll talk more about. And then we also have Caitlin Randall, who rounds up our HR team as the payroll benefits specialist. I'll just quickly go to this. This is the sign that you are greeted with when you come into our HR office. And we like the hashtag glad to be there. So we always start with a positive. As our employees or citizens come to our office, we're hoping that we put our best foot forward with regards to customer service right off the bat. Our goals and objectives, I pretty much like to tell people, as I describe the city's HR team, is we are the corporate HR team for our organization. So everything that an HR department handles, we handle, including our safety aspect or risk management aspect. I won't go into all the highlights for 2021, but one thing that stood out, of course, is our pandemic response. We were very involved with the city's efforts. We took on an additional effort of working directly with employees who were affected as well by COVID to maintain their confidentiality as well as to maintain the workplace safety. We also, if you recall, last year you approved the NeoGov platform for the Human Resources Office, and so we've been busy purchasing that as well as implementing phases of that, and we're going to continue to do that. We got the online application system already up and running, and now we're working on our HR core program. We also had a new leave program, our parental leave policy, which you might be aware of, but we introduced that January 1, and that was a huge positive for our employees. It also, I think from a recruitment standpoint, really causes folks to take a look at us and saying that we're cutting edge. We are getting there with regards to even our leave programs, and that goes for not only the mother of the baby, but also the father. Couple of other things there. I wanted to point out the Employees Helping Employees is an initiative that came out of COVID. It was something that we wanted to do, and it made sense to introduce that during this COVID time. Daryl Lesack and Tiffany Toda, as a part of our leadership team, helped steer this initiative, but it's just that, employees that are willing to step in and help other employees. Our performance metrics are there. We, of course, can put numbers to just about anything, but initially the metrics that we're paying attention to are always our vacant positions, what average active number of full-time employees. You hear a lot about the full-time budgeted positions, but this is actually how many do we have on the books. Our percentage of full-time employees that are vested for retirement, which is a very humbling number. Over 50% of our population is already vested for retirement. So that's a positive that they're staying with us to be vested, but also a little scary number that some folks could walk at any time with regards to being vested. Hopefully they'll stay the 30 plus years. And then our turnover rate from a city standpoint as a whole. So our department efficiencies is implementing the NeoGov platform. That streamlines all of our workflow processes and really brings it up into the 21st century. Also, we're working on updating our employee guidelines and policies and supporting new policies that need to come online with regards to that. Our new programs is to continue to work with NeoGov. We've got a lot of online platforms and ideas associated with that. Our citywide salary structure, of course, implementing what we're doing with our compensation and classification study. The training and development specialist is also going to be a new position that's added into HR. That position will focus on just that, training the organization. Required trainings that we like to see, obviously, in HR, like harassment training, but also going a step further and really building out career paths for employees. So we can use that even on the recruitment so that an individual knows they have a career path when they join us as an organization. And this position is going to be key in helping us map that out. As well as I want to set this person up to begin a leadership academy for supervisors so that we're training new supervisors that are coming on board or being promoted. And so they're understanding the culture that we're trying to create, as well as those things they need to know in their toolbox to be an effective leader. So some budget highlights. HR is no different than other departments in that we're seeing increases for the majority of our staff with regards to the phase 2. Also, that one extra staff member for training and development is in there. We're decreasing our supplies overall. Our contract services increase slightly every year due to pre-employment screenings. Other charges decreased have to do with education and development. I know that sounds odd since we're adding a training and development specialist. However, if you recall, last year you approved me to go to the Certified Public Manager program. That was roughly about $5,000, so that money has been taken out this year since that's already been purchased. We also are asking for 3 computers for our specialists so that they can work remote. Right now we have IT loaning us computers, and they did that very graciously through COVID, but we believe we need to get them up to speed to be able to work remote. And so that capital expenditure is in there. So the biggest part of my increase with regards to the HR budget is personnel cost, as you can see there. The decrease is the education and development, but for the most part, 13% increase overall in my budget. And I do not have any revenues to show you. So maybe I should start charging for our services. Okay, and I can go through the safety one real quick if you want to pull that up.
Before you go on,
Yes, sir.
our turnover rate, how does it compare to other cities?
So the national average roughly hovers around that 15 to 16%. I've seen it as low as some reports showed 12%. So I think we're doing pretty good. When I first came on board, I will tell you that the vacancy number as a whole scared me because we were up around 80 vacancies. Last couple of years, we have hovered around that 40 to 50 mark. And so we've been pretty steady from that standpoint. Mm-hmm.
Question? No, I actually had a similar question because we we have 639 full-time, but we're running about 585, so you just
Yes, sir.
answered my question as well. Thank you.
No problem. I like it when that happens. So real quickly, the safety budget. Thank you, James. So we have a safety specialist, and then our admin assistant that also supports the HR office is funded out of the safety office. We want to make sure that we're promoting and sustaining a proactive safety culture for the well-being of our employees. The safety specialist and the safety office focuses on not only training, but also return to work processes. Also, they're great resource that our employees rely on. A lot of supervisors will call our safety specialists out to jobs to make sure that we're walking through the safety aspects of what needs to see happen. But primarily from a highlight standpoint in 2021, it was all about the pandemic. The safety specialist stepped up and played a key role in regards to everything pandemic related that dealt with the workplace. Of course, we have a great team in our task team members that serve on that. But Brian Haney, our safety specialist, has played a valid role. He was key in doing the majority of the health screenings from employees. That was well over 695. That was just initial screenings. Some of those turned into multiple screenings, so that number probably increased significantly. As a total, though, the city of Victoria, I think we can count our blessings. Although we did have 125 positive COVID cases, we did not experience some of the devastating news that you saw throughout the nation. So we were blessed from that standpoint. All employees were well, got back to work, so we were pleased with regards to that. Part of that initiative also resulted in us doing care packages for employees, and that came out of the employees helping employees. Again, confidentially, so the safety office would take care of that so that we wouldn't divulge the name of who had the illness, but we prepared donations of other employees that brought forth certain aspects and would prepare care packages that then would be sent to the employee who was affected by COVID. The performance metrics for our safety office deal with, of course, claims. And as you heard earlier, we're going to be taking on property claims as well to streamline that process as a department efficiency. So our total number of workers' comp claims, you can see there. I want to draw your attention, though, to projected fiscal year 21. You're probably thinking, whoa, what is going on there? Because the number is significantly different. We projected that at the high end. We work with TML, who is our workers' comp insurance carrier. And they give us projections. So we forecasted worst case. We hope we don't get to 177 and hover right back around 118. But those are our metrics. And then the department efficiencies I mentioned, new programs is just continuing with regards to getting back up in front of our workforce on live training now, since that is something that we weren't able to do during COVID. We need to develop a better internal program with regards to our claims. Mr. Garza has asked us to look at a more robust risk management process, and so we're doing that now by researching other cities and seeing what they do that we do not. What do we need to do to incorporate that? And safety is also going to be a part of our NeoGov platform update. A lot of the manual forms that they use will be able to push out on our e-form process when we have NeoGov up and running. So the majority of their increase comes from the compensation plan. Otherwise, they are pretty well flat with a little over 2% of an increase. Any questions?
No, thank you.
2 minutes, Mr. Bachnight. That would just,
Good job.
thank you.
Appreciate you getting through that. And we'll take a short recess for 5 to 10 minutes. Let everybody grab what they need to and let go of what they don't need. for allowing us to take a quick recess, and we'll go back and start with Ashley with Communications and Public Affairs.
Good evening. Thank y'all for having me. So we'll start with communications, kickoff post-break, and I am not able to scroll. Tell me when. Okay. So just for the benefit of the public who might be viewing and might not know much about our department, I'll read our description real quick. So we strive to provide relevant and accessible communication with our residents and our staff. We work closely with our team members, and we want to make sure that our information is easily accessible. And so you'll see a lot of that in our 2021 highlights and our highlights for the proposed budget. So we want to do that through creative and modern means. And so we know that we want to reach a diverse population while fostering positive, productive engagement with our citizens. And so what I always like to say is we want to meet people where they're at. And most today are in both traditional and digital means. And so what you'll see, a lot of what we did in the fiscal year 2021 was try to revamp a lot of what we were doing to meet some of those digital technologies. And so that's what we want to continue to do in 2022. So if you haven't already, I'm very proud, obviously, as you can see, I included a lot of photos of our team. They work very hard every day, and so you see a few pictures here, action shots, gotta see those, and then a few of our staff members here too. So here's our org chart. I have a communication specialist who handles most, if not all, of our news releases, a lot of technical writing. She'll be graduating in the fall with a master's. We have our digital media specialist and 2 videographers, one of which is here tonight. Shout out to George. So real quick, our department mission. The City of Victoria Communications and Public Affairs fosters positive relationships with media and provides timely, proactive, and responsive information to media inquiries, creates informative content and programs that allow the community to engage in the decision-making processes of the city, and actively promotes city projects, programs, and initiatives to better inform and engage residents. So what does that mean? So a few of the goals and objectives that we have for this upcoming year, and that we have had since the beginning, is to create that compelling content that'll resonate with our audience, to improve on the existing technologies we have had disposable to us, and then to add new ones, and keep up with the trends. Again, we want to meet people where they're at. We want to provide communication channels that maybe we hadn't thought of before. For example, we're now on Nextdoor. How many of you guys are on Nextdoor? Exciting. We want to meet you guys where you're at. So ultimately, we want to build those stronger community relationships, not only with our staff, with our residents, but also local organizations and partnerships. And this photo was chosen because one of those partnerships coming up is with CVB. And so we want to work with our other departments. And so one of the ways that we want to do that is through efficiencies, which I'll go through in just a second, to allow us the capacity and resources to do that better. So rewind, I'll just quickly glaze over this. There's a lot of highlights to look through, a lot of news. You'll see new, launched, revamp. And so I'll let you go through that on your own time. But one of which was obviously responding to several crises. A lot of what we do is community-wide crises communications in collaboration with our Office of Emergency Management. And so that involved our COVID-19 emergency communications, which really took all hands on deck in terms of press briefings, news releases, and communicating those updates with the public. And then, of course, enter 2021 Winter Storm Uri. We did the exact same thing. And I would say we were very prepared for that because we went through all the technologies in the 2021 year to get to that point. So I was very excited to see that we could use that into action. A few of our performance metrics are below. I say a few, but really that's a lot. So one of which is our website. So you notice that we had a website revamp. We collaborated very closely with our IT department. And you'll see right here a big uptick in our website views. We're very excited about that too. So we revamped the entire homepage and how it looks. We created strategic buttons too so that we were getting most of our information out to the public in that manner. And what we hope to do is to continue to build upon that, perhaps even with some marketing strategies. So I'll let you look through that on your own time. I'm trying to follow the trend of 5 to 10 minutes. One thing I do want to draw your attention to is our project requests and projects completed. In the past, we've had, obviously we're an internal service department. We also work outside of the city with collaborations with other local organizations. One thing I wanted to do was say, okay, how many people are we helping? Which departments are we helping more than others? And how can we balance that a little bit? How can we also make them more successful? And so one of the ways that we're doing that is we created a new project request system for our department. And so that other departments know exactly how we can help support them, and so that we can keep track and know exactly how they're getting supported as well and how we can do better.
I had a question. How much of this uptick on web page visits and YouTube views and everything else do you relate to COVID? And so I'm worried about you building upon those.
Absolutely. It was a significant amount. So I'll give you an example. We look at our analytics, all of these analytics on a weekly and even monthly basis. And Maddie, who's our digital media specialist, prepares the reports, and we noticed that the month of February increased about 60% of our webpage views. And we dug a little further. Beyond our homepage, we looked specifically at our winter weather, I think is what it was called, webpage. And we saw a huge uptick. And we said, okay, that's awesome. But how are we going to create those habits where they keep coming back? And so that's the goal. You know, you'll notice, I don't know if you have, but in the future, if you notice that we have an emergency, we want to make sure that we're building upon those habits. And so we'll create some marketing strategies online so that people continue to come back and we're reaching them. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I did include several video, but you can also check that on your own time. Excited that OpenGov allowed us to be able to include that. And James, I lost the mouse. Thank you. So these videos just tell you a little bit more about what we do. So coming back to efficiency, we've set up our project request system, we've set up a project management system, and you'll see some of those reflected in the budget as well. And again, that's so that our department can get better at what we're doing and helping better service our internal service departments. A few highlights in terms of new programs and initiatives. You'll see a lot of these carry the same theme. So 2021 was about revamp and new technologies. We want to build upon those two new technologies and be a little bit more strategic and intentional about community engagement. So you'll see all of these right here really focus on that. And with that, some of the highlights included are supplies increased. So Sprout Social, if you don't know, is a social media management tool. And so we want to better prepare our departments to respond during emergencies, but also on a daily basis to have that two-way conversation through scheduling in advance and being better organized in terms of communication aspects within their departments. We also see maintenance increased, and that's due to software, one of which is better providing easier to produce video to put on social, our cable channel even, and more. And so if you wanted to scroll down, you can dive down a little bit further. Here you'll see our M&O costs are under, like I mentioned earlier, majority under maintenance. Like I said, it was highly due to software and, of course, contractual services. And so we stayed pretty flat. Like I said, our ultimate goal in communications is to build upon those existing technologies. Really, a lot of them were even revamped in 2021. And so we just want to continue to do that. And that's all I have. Any questions? Yes.
So your story is all digital. What are you doing about a lot of my constituents that are not Facebook followers?
Sure. Well, a lot. One thing that I didn't talk much about was during COVID, for example, during crisis communications, we wanted to make sure that we were reaching all audiences. So when we do that, we think of what are the other means, not just social media, not just website. A lot of the metrics are easier to manage and monitor through digital means, but that's also working with people such as The Advocate, local media, and making sure that they get the information easily accessible and creating partnerships and opportunities for us to get the information to them in a timely manner. And so we're building on those relationships. We're creating flyers especially during emergencies, to meet those people where they're at. For example, during COVID, we knew that a lot of people don't have access to the internet. And we created flyers to be able to post on different businesses, to let them know about the mask recommendations at the time, the different orders that were going in place. And so I may not have focused on that today, but that's simply because it's always been the case, and we definitely don't dismiss it now.
Well, and
That's a good question.
Another example too is, excuse me, during the winter freeze week, where we obviously went through loss of water pressure as well. A lot of those briefings were being carried on radio stations, on the TV channels, and various other entities were sharing them through their means of social media as well. And so we definitely have grown in our technology, relationships, et cetera, with all of these different media partners, so that in times of crisis, which is obviously when it's even more critical to get the information out, it can be through all of those means. We're cognizant of the fact that it necessitates a diversified approach, but during crisis is really when it matters the most. And so I think we're in a much better place now than we have been in the past.
Right. And I apologize I didn't focus on that as much. It's second nature to me. So that was a very good question. You gave me the opportunity to address it, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, and as a business owner, I appreciated those
Yeah.
flyers. They were very
Good.
helpful.
And kudos to OEM, the Office of Emergency Management. They worked with us to get those out, and our liaison group, of course.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Do we have the technological capability to do a mass text just based on whoever's latched onto whatever tower?
That's a really good question. We work with the Office of Emergency Management, again, to get those mass texts out. Again, it's a mass text, but it's also a mass phone system. So those who are registered can do so. And so if they haven't registered, we highly recommend them to do so. And we did use those during both emergencies.
But I'm talking about unregistered.
We do not.
We would have to look into that. James, I don't know if you know the answer to that question, but all of our conversations have been centered around, registering for updates. I think it's a combination, but I don't know for certain.
Right. We currently do not have that capability. I know what you're referring to. As somebody was to drive into Victoria, they would get that alert based upon that. We do not have that currently, but we can certainly start looking into
Something we
that
could
for
look
you.
at, because what I was thinking, both Harvey and Yuri, most of my comments and questions come to me from texts. When we are without electricity, it makes it hard to always have access to YouTube and Facebook, but everybody always has their phone. And I would like us to develop that type of capability where we can just, I don't know how detailed it is, like if you can pick certain towers that are within the city limits and be able to hit anybody that's tied onto those towers. And that way no one has to worry about registering.
Assuming the towers are up, right?
Well, even in the other counties, as soon as Harvey came through, like in Aransas County, they brought in temporary towers.
Right.
It took a day or two, but it was just another means to communicate and to get the message out.
We'll look into that further,
Okay.
absolutely.
And could you also use this opportunity to talk about the Swift 911, which most of us, or many of us, used for the COVID shots, but is that active for other notifications, or do we have to do something different?
So right now, we are trying to limit it to its use, which was intended to be only for emergencies. And so you'll notice that we try not to overburden people with messages, especially in the middle of the night or early in the morning. And so we've learned in the past, I've worked with Rick McBrayer and the OEM, and we definitely don't want to do that. But it is a really good system that we use. And that's what the one I was referring to earlier, which both text messages to those who are registered and leaves a voicemail if they don't answer their phone call.
So
But
how do they
to answer your question, people can register for Swift 911 just at any moment's notice.
Okay.
And that's sort of, there's like a generic list of people that have signed up for just generic updates. And what we did with COVID was that we would send a notice to all of those generic members saying, if you specifically want updates for COVID, we created like a subgroup.
Okay.
But we do have a generic group that people could go to the OEM website and sign up for Swift now.
Correct.
And if during a hurricane or something else popped up, we can send a message out. So that's an ongoing thing that people can sign up for updates for.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
All right, so next up, we're gonna transition to a couple of our internal service funds, starting with BESD.
Good evening, council. Long time no see. Glad to be back. Building and equipment services, this has been a year of learning for us, 2021. And so we've got some really exciting things coming up for 2022 that I'm happy to share with you. Real quick description. function of our department is to perform maintenance on city facilities. Your normal stuff, structural, electrical, plumbing, air conditioning. Custodial Services Department strives to maintain a high standard of cleanliness in all of our buildings. We want to have a pleasant environment for the public to come into, as well as our staff to come into every day. They have to live in this place for a large portion of their lives, so we want it to be nice and clean for them. And the Fleet Department basically accounts for the costs of operating a central maintenance facility. Quick look at the organizational chart. This is the proposed organizational chart. We do have 2 more positions proposed for this year, the project manager or project coordinator. We really haven't landed on what we're going to call that yet, but their main focus is going to be to really take hold of the third-party type of jobs that we have with contractors. Like, for instance, you've probably seen that we've created a giant blind corner over here of Juan Lynn and Bridge Street. We're putting the new generator in there, and that really draws a lot of my supervisor and myself, draws a lot of our time that we could be doing other things to managing those third-party projects. And we, at the same time as moving back and forth between our projects and those projects, we can't really give them the time that they deserve. The other position is the custodian. We currently have 4, we'll have 5. With that, we will eliminate all of our custodial contracts that we currently have in the city. We had 5 total. We've eliminated now the one largest one that we had was at 700 Main Center. We also have the golf course, the parks office, the police department substation on the north side of town, and the public works facility. We'll be taking all of those over in-house. We will realize some savings from that, so that's going to be listed under our efficiency tab as well. The mission of the Building and Equipment Services Department at the City of Victoria is to ensure that all city staff have safe, functional, reliable, and comfortable automobiles, buildings, and workspaces. That sounds good. I wrote that. So some of our goals look a lot like they did last year. As I said, we haven't had a lot of time to really, just handling the operation day to day. We haven't had a lot of time to focus on this particular thing. So we want to increase our operational efficiency, decrease our response time to our service calls, promote and facilitate the integration of technology, which this is going to be great. I think Mr. Foote will talk about this more in depth, but we've been procuring a new asset management software that's going to be used citywide, and I've been able to be a part of the selection process of that, and I think it's going to help us a ton. Just being able to manage our mechanical assets and our buildings and our fleet and everything, it's going to be wonderful. Comprehensive preventative maintenance program is something that's really important to me. I believe that being a proactive approach to that can really eliminate a lot of the unforeseen expenditures that can come from not paying attention to preventive maintenance. So these are some of the things that I'm really looking forward to focusing on once we get our additional positions this coming year. Another thing that we're going to look at is improving our fleet utilization by monitoring vehicle and equipment usage. We feel like we have some opportunity for improvement there. We've got quite a few pieces of machinery that seem like they don't get the full potential of their use every year. So Enterprise has also helped us look at some of that stuff. So as we roll into the highlights of what we did in 21, we have the emergency generators. Obviously, you've seen that. We have poured piers for this one outside of this building, I think this morning. So we're right on the way to getting that done. And we actually have the one at the community center set there. It's not fully operational yet, but that's been a huge project. It's been a long time coming, so we're really excited about that. We successfully procured firms and will begin a facility study and master plan. We've just this week, I think, notified the firm that we want to go with, that we would like to enter negotiations with them on that. So super excited about that too. It's been quite the experience to procure that. But we've gotten it done, and we're really excited because that's going to really be a guiding light for us in the future. We completed all of our HVAC asset replacement program as prescribed this year. That went without a hitch. It was wonderful. We installed a access control system at the 700 Main Center facility. Before it was manually locked every day. At the end of the day, now we have electronic locks, and we can let people come and go as they need to. We've recently executed a contract to renovate our fuel island, which is our city's fuel station. It's located at where I office at the City Service Center. It was just getting to be a real problem. It's very old, so very excited about that as well. So obviously we replaced the custodial contract. We're gonna replace the rest of them this coming year. COVID-19 has been crazy for everybody, but a highlight of our 21 was that we successfully implemented all of our sanitation protocols with our custodial staff. They were wonderful, fearless people. They just went right in and took care of everything, no questions asked. They were wonderful through that pandemic. So I can't take my hat off enough to them. We've successfully procured a fleet maintenance and management contractor and are currently involved in contract negotiations with them. As you're aware, I spoke before how Enterprise was going to take some of that load off of the maintenance contractor and allow them to focus more on vehicles that have a higher priority, like public safety and the heavy machinery and public works and things that fix the roads and stuff like that. So we will realize a little bit of savings from that contract as well. So that's great. And we did come up with a plan to integrate the remainder of our eligible vehicles into the Enterprise lease program over the next 3 years. So looking forward to that as well. That'll, of course, depend somewhat on our budgetary constraints and stuff, but we at least have a guide to go by at this point. So that's great for us. We have some performance metrics here. They're not too in depth. There's a few deals you can see here that you can kind of scroll over and see what the values are, but this is pertaining to fleet. So this is going to have contract work orders versus non-contract work orders, and it's going to have our actual number of contract vehicles that we have in these years that are indicated here. As you can see, so we have our estimated contract work orders look like they're trending downward. That's because in 2022, we expect to have more vehicles on the enterprise fleet. So our fleet maintenance contractor won't be seeing that kind of workload. We expect it to kind of fall off a little bit, but we're not replacing all of the vehicles that we feel like we need to at this time that we own, that'll be maintained by our fleet contractor. So we're still expecting some of that to be there. Our new contract is going to be great in affording us some savings as well on the non-contract side of things, which we'll talk about that later, but that'll be the new way that it's written is going to afford us a lot of savings there. So for building services metrics, again, these are pretty vague, but we have preventative maintenance as opposed to repairs completed. We like to see the preventative maintenance column much higher than the repairs column, which and these have started to trend downward. And I feel like this one, the fiscal year 2021 is incomplete. It's not projected. This is what we had totally completed at the time that we made this chart. So it's not forecasted for like an annual total. This is just, this was completed a few months ago. So the numbers are quite a bit lower. And also with the craziness that's happened this year with the flooding, the freezing, all of the different weather things that have been thrown at us, the building services supervisor and myself has responded quite a bit to a lot of these things personally after hours and whatnot. And so some of that stuff wasn't really tracked. But overall, it looks like our repairs have gone down considerably in the last year, and we project that to continue. So the preventative maintenance program, what little we've been able to invest in that has started to pay off. And custodial buildings maintained, this is just the total number of buildings that we maintain currently and that we will be maintaining. So we've had 8 buildings we've been maintaining, and next year we'll have 11 total. For our efficiencies, the addition of the project manager position should greatly increase our effectiveness. We're really looking forward to that. The master plan is going to be a guidance tool for us. It's going to really help our proactive approach to our maintenance. And replacing large custodial contracts with staff is going to allow us to realize some savings. It's not a huge amount of savings, but it is some, and it's nice to be able to provide place of employment for some people and keep that going. So The new fleet contract is expected to save approximately $155,000 over the previous contract annually. That does not include the savings we expect to see through the non-contract terms that we've written in the new RFP. So that'll be even over and above that. Our new programs for 2022 is to continue to explore ways to improve our preventative maintenance schedules. Again, that's not something we've had a lot of time to work on, but we're looking forward to it. Complete and implement our facility master plan, bring the project manager on board, eliminate custodial contracts, grow into our enterprise lease program, and implement our new fleet contract for public safety and heavy duty, and establish relationships with our local repair shops to help expedite work performed by the city's fleet of leased vehicles. So we haven't spent much time with them, the local guys, but that's something we intend to do here in the next year. To expedite some of our repairs and maintenance at those facilities. Overall, our budget looks like it changes kind of dramatically. We're at 15%. Most of that's going to be for personnel. We have 2 additional positions. That seems like a lot for the few positions that we have. Maintenance increased $310,000. That's mostly due to that moving from the repairs line to the maintenance line, and that's just a shift. Contractual services, we're going to see a $17,000 net gain in the cost of those. That takes into account the savings from the fleet management contracts and also an increase in the cost of fuel going into the next fiscal year. Capital expenses are budgeted at 1.7, 1.7 for vehicles, 6.5K for HVAC. That's just for this particular department. There's going to be total in the city probably about $48,000 invested in HVAC. And we're buying a couple new tools and stuff like that for the department. So that concludes mine. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
The fleet leasing program includes the maintenance.
Yes, ma'am, it does.
So in your metrics, you're talking about the maintenance that you anticipate.
Yes.
That you'll be maintaining, but there'll still be maintenance. I mean, that looks like, gosh, this is great. We're going to be having less vehicles down, but it's just that they'll be included in the lease.
That's right, yeah. We will see less maintenance come through our garage. Not that the maintenance is going to decrease a whole lot. We're not expecting just a ton of vehicles. I think we have something like 20 that are going to be going on to the lease program this year. And we will see some reduction just due to the fact that they'll be newer, but that metric isn't included in the metric here. This is just for the city garage.
And then where is the lease programs? Where's the cost for it shown in your numbers? Or what category is it in?
It has, let's go to down more. Here we go. Data and where what?
I guess under
Contracts?
contractual services.
Where, it says 60, vehicle lease program right here.
Okay,
It's under the
interdepartmental.
Budgetarily, it's there. But the various departments that are impacted by the lease program, you'll hear from them directly as
Okay.
well. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
but budgetarily, it's included in Roger's budget.
Any other questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Welder.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening. So I'll try to get us back on the short track on this. So information technology. So our department basically supports all the city departments. We manage to support all the departmental and enterprise systems and maintain an extensive technology infrastructure. We provide services over 25 locations, maintain and support over 100 application systems, 100 servers. Now, a lot of these are virtual versus physical server. Maintaining backups for nearly 50 terabytes worth of data. Maintain and supports over 1,600 devices. It's amazing when these devices are not only computers, We have phones, we have copiers, we have MDTs in the vehicles, radios, everything like that. We field over 5,400 support requests a year, maintain and manage the countywide radio system with over 900 subscribers, 3 maintain radio towers, and 800 square miles of radio coverage. This is our breakdown. We currently still have 10 on our staff. We did do a little bit of a change this year as far as changing just personnel titles. So we sort of looked at it and said made it easier if we kept within our support, made it a little bit more easier for people to understand that those were the individuals actually doing a lot of support. We have 2 personnel in our networking. Those are the ones that handle all of our networking, our communications, our radio communications, phone communications. And then our system administrator, system tech, those are the ones that actually handle the servers, the antivirus, sort of the back end of the platform. Our department mission is to provide excellent levels of service and support and technology that enables the departments to deliver quality services. We're there to support those departments and make sure they can deliver those services efficiently and effectively to our customers. Our goals and objectives. All initiatives are prioritized directly to support the business needs of those departments and support the support of the City of Victoria's business objectives. We provide information technology coordination and management services for public safety agencies, police and fire, and with their projects. Of course, we maintain compliance, security, and confidentiality of sensitive areas, such as our SCADA network. And then we provide support and effective customer service to all users of the City of Victoria's information systems. Some of the highlights that we covered in 2021, obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, we were asked to provide means to be able to provide employees to be able to work remotely. And also, not only working remotely, we also had to come up with solutions that would effectively be able to continue doing city council meetings. So Zoom, Teams was another effective meeting that we started platform that we started utilizing very well. We did replace some of our firewalls with some new gen firewalls. The big one, this next one, which is really a big highlight, was we completed a wireless infrastructure upgrade that basically allowed us to provide more guest Wi-Fi into certain locations and also just actually increase our bandwidth, which in this case helped a lot because as we are transitioning a lot of people over into laptops, now they're more mobile, they can be working from anywhere and utilizing the wireless. We did change out our endpoint protection, which is our antivirus solution. We went with a more robust solution. A lot of what we will look at in our field is that if we've got something that may be working, but as new technology gets newer, and so we'll look at those. We'll look at peer reviews, reach out to other agencies, and if there's something that does a better job, obviously we're going to look at that. And that was one of those where we looked at endpoint protection and felt like it was a smart move to a newer platform. Another big portion that we did was obviously assist the county with the implementation of the Luminaire software and then also with all of the COVID vaccine clinics. That was a big part of the task that we were tasked with to do. A couple of them that we did not list, obviously with the finance department with their OpenGov solution, we assisted them, and then also with HR with their NeoGov implementation. So some of the metrics, we basically worked with just some very simple metrics, but basically we do have phone calls that we do answer. We do have help desk, but a lot of of our employees still like to call us. So we had our phone calls, a number of help desk requests, and then also the after-hour calls. We do maintain after hours for police and fire, and so we can see that basically why is it not showing up? There it is, numbers there. That they pretty much stayed about the same. Department efficiencies, we did do a reorg to align personnel more closely with the changes in workload. As we see more and more of our platforms go to cloud-based solutions like OpenGov, NeoGov, we saw that while some of ours on our support side, we did not necessarily need as much as prior, and so we moved one person over into networking because that's where we saw a lot of that happening on some of the work orders that was coming through. Some of the initiatives for 2022, we do have a new software implementation that we're going to be bringing to council later this year to, as a recommendation. This is a citywide enterprise asset management solution. This also includes a citizen engagement portal that will allow the citizens to not only consider either one request or multiple requests, but it can be sent to multiple departments. This can be, like I said, through the website or through a app on their phone. But this will allow us, a lot of what we saw with a lot of our departments is that they all have a work order system. However, those work order systems do not talk to each other. And so this would be one platform to where everyone could be on one platform, citizens would have one place to go, and then everyone would be able to respond to those requests. This is going to be a phased implementation where Public Works being the first part of the phase, and then we anticipate after that, phase 2 will be environmental services, building services, and parks in the second phase. It does have the capability of incorporating other departments. One of the other departments would probably be looking at a later term would possibly be with our code enforcement.
So is it, just really quickly, so this is, because this is a pretty big deal in my opinion. So currently we have 5 different systems that take information, right? And so a real life example of, hey, what's going on would be, somebody calls, gives an address to a house and says, hey, I'm having this particular issue, right? If it's a code enforcement issue, they'll call code enforcement will pull it up. But it may not necessarily, convey any information related to environmental services or to public works. And so it's very difficult to really understand, big picture what's going on in a specific property when, you have to go into 5 different systems, talk to 5 different departments, to kind of figure out what's going on. Not only is it difficult to provide excellent customer service when you don't have access to all the information about that particular property, but internally, it creates a very inefficient process in order to respond quickly to a need. Because it's one of those where, and you probably know people that deal with it, right? Somebody calls a number, says, oh, that's not me, you got to call this other number, right? And so what we want to try and achieve is a more centralized customer service operation where if somebody called, it don't matter who picks up, you take the order request, and because it's all in the same system, you can input it yourself and you don't have to refer to them to a different department. And that also more quickly allows us the ability to respond, much quicker. The integration of an app is a really good tool to supplement the traditional means of like a phone. Because as we know, many folks carry around their cell phones. Some of these application systems literally allow people to take a picture of a pothole, take a picture of a downed, street sign, and you literally just upload it on the app, and it automatically sends it to Public Works. And some of these systems are comprehensive enough to where once Public Works closes it out, because you created an account to submit it, you'll get a message saying, hey, the sign was fixed, or hey, the pothole was patched. And so there are these systems through technology that allow for better customer service. And so this is huge that we're working towards transitioning to a more modernized customer service operation. Yes, it'll take some time, but it's a big deal, in my opinion.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Obviously, we've got some equipment that needs to be replaced. One of the another measure that we're going to tackle next year is actually replacing out some of our equipment that's protecting our SCADA network. We'll go with, again, some next gen where we talked about efficiencies. We'll bring in something that's a little bit more robust. This is an important one that we also have is that we're going to be looking at a new internet service provider, which was interesting that it will probably double our bandwidth with reduction of costs. So basically, I'm pleased to say that Derek's hard work has, with the broadband committee, has paid off, and we were actually very surprised to see the numbers that were coming in on some of the quotes for that. We basically saw about a 40% reduction in savings, even though we doubled our bandwidth speed. So that was pretty significant. Budget highlights: personnel benefits increased obviously to the phase 2 compensation study. Maintenance increased due to $92,000 due to purchase of additional Microsoft Office 365 licenses. This was in order to facilitate the completion of the NeoGov transition, where we had to have all of our employees, even our field employees, to actually have email licenses so they can receive those timely notifications from NeoGov. We also had an upgrade from our Laserfish Standard to Laserfish Rio, which occurred this year, and obviously our maintenance agreement, maintenance costs for those increased significantly on there. And then we also had a transition of costs from NeoGov, from professional services to software maintenance. A lot of what was implemented in this year with NeoGov was through professional services, and now we're seeing some of that maintenance costs being transitioned over to software maintenance. Contractual services decreased 70,000. That's in regard to what we're saying with NeoGov and OpenGov. And then capital expenditures are budgeted at 54K. You can see on our maintenance and operation, we did see that slight increase 2%. Maintenance was the biggest one. It was within, we saw a decrease in our computer maintenance. So prior, when I mentioned earlier about some of our firewall replacements we did this year, we were able to incorporate and purchase long-term maintenance agreements. So that obviously took a decrease in this year, next year's budget for that. Software maintenance, that's where we saw that largest increase, and that's where we saw with NeoGov and OpenGov and Laserfish Rio being the three on there. Contractual services decreased, and obviously our capital outlay decreased because a lot of what we purchased this year, firewalls and wireless, was implemented in there. One of the things that's a little different in my budget versus the rest of the departments is obviously we have a recommended, not recommended list, but then I also have all of the technology lists for all of the departments. And I do want to draw the attention because Cheryl had mentioned earlier that she was doing upgrades on her computers. So part of the process when we were going through this with the pandemic was while we were providing a lot of laptops for those employees who just had computers, those were laptops that were typically already out of service, had already spent their 5-year replacement cycle, so they really weren't up to this. So what we did was we identified those employees that in future possibly that they could utilize a laptop versus a computer. So as you go through and look under there, any of those that have a replacement / upgrade, those were computers that were now being upgraded to laptops. So those will be employees that will now be able to be mobile in case of any other incidents. And that's my presentation. If you have any questions.
No, thank you, Mr. Foote.
Thank you.
Mr.
Y'all-
Foote,
Go ahead.
I'd
Sorry.
just like to say that your department is very quiet, but with everything that we've gone through with our technology in this past year and all the communication, every time I come to you with a dumb question or I've locked myself out, you've always been great, and your whole department is very impressive, so thank you.
Thank you. And just, there are no dumb questions.
Yes, that's very appreciative that he didn't put the city council calls broken out as a separate line item, because I was gonna say, just based on my calls, it would have been kind of embarrassing.
So it's time to transition to our public safety departments. At this point, it's safe to assume that we will go slightly past 8 o'clock, and so I hope that that's all right. I'll blame myself for taking an hour at the beginning. But we'll be all right. Chief?
Okay, we hadn't heard from you in a while.
That's right, yeah, I was trying to make up for it, yeah.
You did it.
All right, good evening, council, and I'd like to thank James Foote for all he does for the police department as well. We have a nice banter going on that we fund his department, but anyways, we go back and forth, and he's very helpful to us. All right, so look at our police department. The police department is made up of 2 bureaus. I've added bureaus along with the divisions that you're probably used to in the past. So we're going to have the Administrative Bureau, which is commanded by Deputy Chief Mark Jameson, who also is the second in command of the police department. Under his command, you have the Support Services Division. It's commanded by Captain Caleb Brashears, which includes 911 call center, who's managed by civilian manager Ted Thompson. We've added this Operations Bureau, and I'll go up a little bit so you can, well, let's look at those pictures too. You can see the organizational chart where we've made some changes. And as we go along, I'll point that out. So when I talk about the bureaus, you'll see that there's an additional deputy chief. The additional deputy chief will command the Operations Bureau. That'll be the Criminal Investigations Division and Patrol Division under that deputy chief's command. And the patrol division is commanded by Captain Kevin Sanderson. Criminal investigations by Elaine Moya, who has just moved over there. Her and Captain Brashear's traded places. So if you'll see, when I got here, I looked at the org chart and I thought it was very functional. But as I was moving towards a data-driven, intelligence-based police department, I really needed to separate the Operations Bureau and the Administrations Bureau so that we could really start working, digging down into crime reduction. And I wanted somebody basically as a crime czar who would find better ways to get into those areas, make them more efficient, help them work, do what they can with the staffing they have. And as you'll see on this org chart, you'll see there's no SWAT team, but yet we have a SWAT team. Because we're looking at officers that do they have multiple functions. They're full-time officers. Say the SWAT team is made up of different officers from different parts of the department, but you won't see that on the org chart because it's not a full-time position. Another example is Detective James Collins here. He's the Crime Stoppers detective, sexual registration detective, and he's a bailiff. So he's got a full plate. And that's kind of what we're dealing with.
And Secret Service.
Right. Your protection. So that's kind of what we're dealing with on the police department. An agency our size will have that. That's normal. However, there are some areas where we can make some improvements to our staffing, and we're looking at that. We're always looking for ways to make force multipliers. We're looking at technology, community participation, social media and education. It really takes some creativity because I don't want to come here every year and ask for more and more people. I want to get to a staffing level that helps us with our current workload, and then I want to find ways to be more efficient and be a good steward of taxpayer money.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
along those lines, I was concerned when I saw the reduction of 2 positions and then an addition of 1. Could you talk a little bit about the reason for the reduction?
Yes, sir. So we didn't really lose a police officer. What we did is we reorganized that police officer and made it a deputy chief. So we still have that that position. It's just now a deputy chief position. And the reason we did that is because I feel that deputy chief is going to bring extra value. Yes, we need a line officer. We need those officers on the street and getting to that call as soon as they can. But we also need someone with great experience in patrol and investigations who can help us streamline these processes. We need to do a little better job than we're doing with our investigative process. And that's why I've got 3 outstanding candidates that we're going to be looking at this week to try to help us in that area. And once we work along with our criminal analysts, I think that 1 position that we added is going to pay extreme dividends. Now, we're looking at the 1 civilian position that we lost, and we didn't really lose it. We actually found that if we merge our records unit and our case preparation civilians, we're looking at a better process, more efficient. It's going to be better for customer service, but we're also going to cross-train the 2 groups. So we can actually do away with the 1 position and still end up with better service and better efficiency.
Okay.
So for example, right now, depending on what you need, you go to 2 different parts of the building. So, if you wanted to go to records, you would have to come to this other building. If it was case preparation, it was the other building. And oftentimes people have to be sent, to one or the other. And so from an efficiency standpoint, it makes sense to have 1 centralized area where it don't matter what the resident is needing from PD, that's where they go. And so part of this reorg is going to be physically relocating offices and personnel so that they're all near the area that actually faces Bridge Street, so that now anytime anybody needs somebody from PD, they just go to that entrance, and regardless of what they need, it's there. And so that simple physical move of placing everybody in 1 place creates the opportunity for an efficiency by not having to have as many personnel there.
We found that most citizens get confused. Which way do we go? We're having to direct them. So this way, They just go to the front of the PD, they go to the window, and they can get what they need there. And we become more efficient by cross-training both groups. It's a win-win. All right, so the department mission is to reduce crime and the fear of crime through outstanding police services in partnership with the community. You'll see that the majority of anything I'm talking about will include a partnership with the community. I believe strongly in that. So our goals and objectives. Our goals and objectives fall under the growth, capacity, and infrastructure section of the Comp Plan 2035 plan. They include 4 of the top 5 priority action items established by council. So we hope to reduce overall crimes by 3%. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot, especially when we're dealing with COVID last year. I kind of see is that going to be, that will be an uphill battle due to everything being shut down last year. So respond to priority calls for service within 7 minutes or less, answer all incoming calls in 10 seconds or less, 90% of the time. I can tell you a lot of cities are having trouble answering their 911 calls. They can't seem to staff enough people in the 911 call centers, which is also something we're dealing with. But we're getting creative, finding ways to get them staffed. You can see the others. You can see the others there where we're still working towards trying to get our vacancy rate under control. We're hoping to get it down to below 6 per year. If we can do that, that's going to be a big win. When I got here, there were 16 vacancies. We currently have 4. We're going to increase our community engagement. Prior to me getting here, the year before I got here, they were way up. COVID obviously knocked them down, so we're going to get them back up. We're going to meet in person. We're not just going to do the social media and online type things, but we're also working with print media and TV media as well.
I admire your choice of photos.
You're in one. All part of the big plan. So fiscal year 2021 highlights. This is something I'm really proud of. The department has been recognized for its 3rd time, 12 years running, for its best practices by the Texas Police Chiefs Association. And we just went through that process last week, and we had 2 chiefs that represent Texas Police Chiefs Association that came to the PD, inspected us, and we were just notified on Friday that we received re-recognition. So kudos to the men and women of the Victoria Police Department.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Again, we lowered our vacancy rate. We made a difference, a 77.78 decrease in our vacancy over 2021 highlights. We went from 16 to currently have 4. And that's obviously, it would be great if they were already on the street. Unfortunately, some of those are in training, some are still in field trainings, some getting ready to go to the academy. So about a year from now, if we're able to retain everybody, we'll be in really good shape. One of the things we did do is we expanded our social media platforms. We went to Twitter and Nextdoor, and you'll see there, they tell us that Nextdoor has 62,000 household subscriptions in Victoria. So we're hoping to get as much information as we can out there regarding what we're doing. We've implemented the Apex Training Simulator as a regional recruiting tool and a training for Victoria Police Department. We'd hope to get you council members through that as well. It's pretty good times. Established the Tanglewood Square Crime Watch along with the help of Ms. Scott. We've got a faith-based coalition. I also have created a POAC committee, a police officers action committee, to help us get the officers involved in some of the decision-making on the police department and make sure that I'm kept abreast of any issues that they're seeing in the field. Some of our performance metrics, which I had a lot of trouble with this graph because some of these are very small, but I'll just kind of run through them real quick. Overall crime in fiscal year 2020, we had 6,917 offenses. Right now, we're projected to have 6,709, so a bit of a decrease. And as we look at fiscal year 2022, we're looking at it'll probably increase as everyone comes back from COVID and things of those natures. So, but we're working on it. Again, there's the vacancy rate. You can tell that that's very important to me. We're working very diligently to keep that down. Here we go with community engagement program. In fiscal year 2020, we had 74 events that we went to. This year, we're projected to only meet 66 of those. And this next fiscal year, we're going to ramp that up to about 80 events or more. We're going to work on programs also to engage our youth. I'm looking at maybe creating a police athletic league or something of that nature where officers can volunteer their time to coach Little League and do other things like that. Maybe a boxing gym. Anybody own a boxing gym we could borrow? We're going to try that out. So our efficiencies, I almost said deficiencies, but our efficiencies, the following projects have either been implemented or in the planning stages. So we're going to hire to our authorized strength, and that should help us reduce our overtime costs. Again, we've been using our social media to get our messages out to the masses, and I use that as a force multiplier, because if you don't have those platforms, you've got to have officers there in person at numerous meetings throughout the city. And so if I can get as much information I can through social media, that is a force multiplier that keeps our overall numbers down as far as what we need on the department. One of the things that we did was we asked finance, and Gilbert was nice enough to let us have 3 of our vehicles that we were taking offline. They were no longer going to be used. They're going to be sold for auction. And I said, I need to use 3 as a force multiplier to put in areas of the city that we're seeing problems. So you might see a car parked for 24 hours and you're wondering why it didn't move. That's why. It's one of our force multipliers to help us with control our accidents and running red lights and any other type of problems that we have in the city. I think that's going to be very helpful. And we already talked about how we absorbed the 1 position so that we can merge the 2 civilian staffs, and that's going to create a more efficient process. This is something that I think is going to really pay dividends. We relocated our training unit to the mall. We already had our community engagement unit there before. I decided we needed to put them back there. And we're really taking advantage. We're capitalizing on the extra space and increase our presence in the mall. So you might see like Officer Brager walking the mall trying to recruit or just engage with the community. I just felt like it was just not the optics weren't good to be in the mall, walk up to that door, and it was locked. I wanted it to be more just open and available to the community so they can come in if they need something or they have something they want to talk about. They can take a report or just talk with an officer that would be available to them. So I think that's a really good thing for us. Our recruiting strategy changed to looking for our homegrown talent. I feel strongly that we're not wasting our time, but part of our retention problems are that we were recruiting from other areas in the state. They would stay here a couple years and they would go back to where they're from. And totally get it, but I think we need to put our efforts here at home in this region and see how that turns out. I'll talk a little bit about the cardboard cutout that we did of David Brager. That's paid dividends. I mean, we got a huge social media buzz by it, and the cutout cost $250. There was no advertising costs, nothing that was ongoing, just that one-time cost, along with some other expenses. But we placed that throughout the city, and we've done really well with it. So fiscal year 22 programs and initiatives. We're going to continue to budget for incremental increases in police department staffing. Or as the city manager stated, we're looking at the COPS grant again. That's one of the ways that we hope to try to grow the department as as needed. And that's a good way to stair step that growth. We implement the Apex similar training throughout the region. Again, I've shared with you before that I want that to be a recruiting tool. We're going to further explore building needs and/or renovation in order to ensure the highest and best use of our current space. Again, I talked about our youth programs. We're ready to resume our Explorer program. We'd shut it down due to COVID, but that's our pipeline to the future. That's our way to get that homegrown talent and introduce them to the Victoria's Police Department very early. Again, we're instituting a data-driven proactivity through criminal analysis, the crime reduction through partnership with the community. And I'm still working on getting that VIP program. I know I've been talking about that since I got here. We'd got hung up on finding a volunteer coordinator. That has been squared away. We just got someone. I'm going to meet with that person later this week, and we're going to launch this program, and I think we're going to be very successful with it. So budget highlights for fiscal year 2022. Sorry for all the ums. I'm not used to doing that, but I'm doing it. Personnel and benefits include $700K for phase 2 of the compensation plan. I know the city manager went over that. Thank you for the raise. The officers really appreciate it. Supplies increased $49,000, includes $12,000 in one-time funds for a canine equipment. We actually are getting the dog donated, but however, it's going to require some funding to take care of the dog throughout the year and outfit a unit for that. Maintenance increased $53,000, includes one-time dual-sided ID printer. I felt that it was best that if we do our own IDs in-house, after about 4 years, it's going to pay for itself. We won't have that outside cost in the future, and we can take care of our retirees, give them the ID they need as well, along with making sure that our officers are able to get an ID in-house. Support services interface for electronic and written warrants, and public access of info requests kiosk records. Contractual services decreased $92,000 due to reduction mainly in county jail costs and janitorial services. Other charges increased $25,000, includes $10,000 in a one-time cost to send Deputy Chief Jameson to the Senior Management Institute for Police. Interdepartmental decreased $136,000, which includes $127,000 in one-time funds for the vehicle lease program. I just want to say that I'm a proponent of this vehicle lease program. I think it's a really good deal. It's going to save the city some money, and we're going to be able to rotate our cars more often, which means the officers get a more secure, safe, and better running vehicle during that program. So I'm looking forward to that. Our capital expenditures, it's funded at $322,000, with the bulk of it going to the following: $18,000 in building improvements, which is replacing the HVAC at 911, $27,000 in office equipment for chairs and desk replacements, $41,000 communication equipment, which is a backup radio replacement, $93,000 for computer equipment, annual computer replacement, and 3 servers at 911. $84,000 machinery equipment, which is a $50,000 forensic scanner. This is something that is badly needed. What we're going to use this for is you go into a major crime scene, you're able to scan the entire thing. It's going to help us with not having to store as much evidence. We're going to have a clear, crisp 3D scan of the entire crime scene. It'll be used by crime scene. It can be also used for traffic fatalities. So currently what we're using is old surveyor's equipment to rework fatality accidents. This 3D scanner is going to probably knock it down. We can do a scan in a few minutes, as opposed to being out there with that survey equipment for 3 or 4 hours. So that's going to be a big plus. $13,000 in car radars. We've actually got a drone in the budget, which we're excited about. It's going to be used by the SWAT and traffic safety unit. It's going to have a lot of value to it. $40,000 other equipment $22,000 for Brazos ticket writer replacement, $7,000 for taser replacement, and $3,500 for a new camera for crime scene. And then the last bit of this is $19,000 for SWAT, hostage throw phone, and SWAT-related equipment such as sniper gear. Any questions on that? All right, well, if there's no questions, that's all I have. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
And just really quickly, like, again, like any department, if you wanted to see more specifics, at the very bottom of his story is a very comprehensive list of all of the items requested and whatnot. And so again, very detailed. This is obviously one of the largest departments. And so this section of his page is pretty extensive and very specific for those that want more information.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Appreciate it. It's used to saying that.
Wake up.
Wake up. Well, I'm excited to present a fire department budget, and I don't ever want to hear again that the fire department gets all the money for public safety after that last presentation. That was great. More for the public's information, because I know council is very aware of this, but the department description, the Victoria Fire Department's an all-hazards organization, which means we respond to not just fires, but EMS calls, hazardous materials, rescues, you name it, the fire department goes to that. You know, when there's not water in a dialysis center, they call the fire department, and the fire department shows up. And we also cover 890 square miles of Victoria County. It's not just the city of Victoria. We provide those same services for the whole county. And we do that with 130 staff members. 127 of those are uniformed, and so we're busy. Not a real big group, covering 890 square miles. One thing to note is we make approximately 12,000 calls a year, and I don't know what it is, but 2021 we have seen at this pace about an 8% increase in call volume. Which is significant for us because we usually see about a 3 to 4% increase year over year. So we're just seeing a significant amount of call volume increase in 2021 so far. And it wasn't all due to the winter weather event. That was a relatively small increase. It's just I don't know what's happening, quite frankly. And I do want to also mention, we forget a lot of times to talk about our fire marshal's office. They do a tremendous amount of work for our community. Not only in our fire prevention activities, but in our code enforcement, building inspections, and processing those new developments and new businesses that are coming into town. And thank goodness we've seen an increase in that activity as well. Our organizational chart, no big changes here for us. We're staying with 130 personnel, but as Mr. Garza mentioned earlier, we look at as changes that reduce inefficiencies as an efficiency. And this year we are adding or changing, realigning some positions to help us in our mission. And one of those is a quality manager position. We've never had that position before. And we really think that'll help us focus on our quality, the quality of the service we deliver. If you look at most private sector agencies, especially in the medical field, they have a quality manager position, that somebody that focuses on that. And just like Chief Arredondo at the police department, recruitment has become paramount for us, and we have never had a position or a person that could focus on that. And this realignment of our org chart is allowing us to push another person into our training division that can really focus on recruitment of firefighters, because we are struggling, and you'll hear me talk a lot about that through this presentation, with recruiting, especially local talent. And to preserve life and property with dedicated and caring service is our mission. And if you didn't know, Roger Welder wrote that for us. Goals and objectives for this fiscal year. We like to start off, and we got this from Dana over at the library. We have strategic pillars or strategic issues we like to focus on each year, and we set goals based on those strategic pillars. One of our goals this year is to complete a formal community risk reduction assessment. Not a big impact to the budget, but it is a very important project for us. We're going to complete the renovation of Fire Station 1 in this upcoming fiscal year. The big pot of that money is budgeted in this current fiscal year, but the construction and completion of that project will happen in the next fiscal year. And there's also a big piece of the support equipment that will go into this project is in fiscal year 22. We'll be expanding our non-emergency services program in fiscal year 22, which will help reduce that 911 usage and burden. And as I mentioned, we'll be looking at ways to help with our recruitment of new firefighters into our organization. And we're looking at working with other agencies like the Victoria College and the hospitals to help create some programs that'll hopefully help us recruit. In 2021, proud to say, based on the the 2035 comprehensive plan, we completed our ISO evaluation. We do that every 10 years, and we received a Class 2 rating. And that's part of the comprehensive 2035 plan, is to maintain that rating. As well as, we've done it, but that's in the process, and it'll be coming before council next month, which is updating our fire code to the 2021 version. And those two pieces are key to the comprehensive plan for 2035. And I didn't put it on here, but not to be outdone by Chief Arredondo, is we also received, or will be receiving, our second renewal of our best practices recognition from the Texas Fire Chiefs Association this year as well. Just hadn't happened yet.
Congratulations in advance.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now the pressure's on. Now we really have to pull it off. Our performance metrics, these are kind of, I call them our global performance metrics we look at every day, literally, to make sure that we're getting to that emergency quickly. Once we get there, and I didn't want to bore you with all that, but we are data intensive, and we drill down deep in each and every response we do. But these are just, like I said, our global performance metrics that we look at. Really, it's about time and how fast we can get to that emergency. Department efficiencies, as I mentioned, one of our efficiencies was we were able to partner with the purchasing department and share a position. One of our members that worked in our office transitioned over into purchasing, as Laura mentioned, and she's able to still do some functions for the fire department in regards to purchasing medical supplies, while she's also doing a job over there for purchasing. So that was an efficiency for us, we think for the whole city. That allowed us to create that recruitment position in our training office. As well as some of those other efficiencies allowed for us to create that quality manager. So those are some efficiencies that we created in 2021 and we'll be creating in fiscal year 22. Also, we completed our 4th fire academy this past year, and that has allowed us to generate a significant amount of revenue that we can use to support our fire training facility. It's not just dependent on general fund to support that fire training facility. We're using these funds based on our fire academy to help support and enhance that facility, as well as produce recruits that we can hire. So it's kind of a win-win there for us, as well as our hazard mitigation program, fee mitigation program, which allows us to recover some funds for our response to motor vehicle accidents. We'll talk about this a little bit later in revenue, I think. But in that first year, and what even a complete year, we generated almost $50,000. And in fiscal year 22, we hope to generate over $100,000 in that program. So that's been a big, kind of additional revenue stream for us to help offset those costs. Fiscal year 22, new programs, initiatives, nothing real new here, but we're looking to expand some of our programs. Like I said, our 911 dependence reduction program, which is our non-emergency services program, where we go out and we try to address these issues before people have to call 911 for lift assistance, for social services, different things like that. We get out there and we get aggressive and provide other avenues to different services that are really needed before they have to start calling 911. Community risk reduction, we talked about that. Our recruitment effort, but as Chief Arredondo also said, one of the things we're really looking at getting back to is that face-to-face community engagement and providing programs and activities and engagement with our community. So that's what we're really looking forward to coming off this pandemic. Those smiles says it all, makes the job worth it right there. I'm going to jump down into this graph to kind of talk about our budget highlights and really look at the variances and kind of show you what those are. The personnel costs, not a significant increase, and that's due to the phase 2, Mr. Garza mentioned earlier, of the compensation study. I'm going to jump down to capital. Not a big dollar amount there either. That is all related to Station 1 projects. We have to buy new extractors, which is the gear cleaners, and a couple other big pieces of equipment, that dryers, PPE machines, and things of that nature for that project, as well as Mr. Foote mentioned too, our computer replacement program, which includes 2 large and expensive printers, copiers, fax scanner machines that are in that capital. So the one I want to spend some time on is our maintenance and operation, and that's where we saw the biggest increase. In the supply category, fuel, well, if I can find it. There you go. Fuel had a $17,000 increase. We all know it's hitting everybody personally in the pocketbook. We've seen an increase in fuel, so that was one of our biggest increases. Uniforms and clothing, jump down to that one. You don't think of that in that one as our PPE, which is one of our most expensive items that we purchase. But we've seen a $10,000 increase just if we buy the same amount of PPE as we did this year, and next year it's a $10,000 increase. And that's just due to the global demand and shortage of supplies and things of that nature. And not only is the more expensive to purchase them, it's more expensive to maintain them, clean them. They have to be inspected every year, so on and so forth. So that's just a big expense for us there in the supply side. On the maintenance side, software maintenance, we had a pretty big increase there. That was due to software programs that we purchased in fiscal year 21. They are now moved into the maintenance side. We are not adding any new software into this fiscal year, so that number will remain flat after this year. We don't foresee adding any new software in the immediate, next 2 or 3 years for sure.
Bless you.
But adding those programs in fiscal year 21 require a maintenance piece going forward. And 52, this one right here, machinery and tools. One of the other big expenses is our air packs, the things we wear on our back in structure fires. They're reaching the end of their service life, and we project we will be spending $20,000 a year just to maintain those. We have applied for a grant to replace those, and we'll be looking at other funding sources in the near future to replace those. But that's what's driving that cost, as well as some transfer of funds from contractual services to maintenance line items. So that's what's driving that cost up in that account, is just to maintain those air packs and then transitioning a relatively big contract from contractual services into a maintenance account. And then, so that's it for the expenditures. Unless you have any questions on that, I do want to touch on revenues real quick. We do have a revenues category, and you can click over on this bar, and then it'll, as April kind of showed earlier, you can kind of look at the different revenue sources that the fire department has. And our two main revenue sources are our county contract and then our EMS billing. And you can kind of see what those two numbers are. This bar in the middle is our ambulance supplemental payment program. And this fiscal year, we've got great news that we're going to be receiving almost $500,000. We're keeping our fingers crossed, Wesley and I and Billy, that's what it comes in as. They preliminary told us that was what it's going to be. This year, Gilbert has projected that a little lower because we never know. They're always changing the rules on us on how they pay out that money. So he did a very conservative estimate of that revenue. But there you can see our main categories of revenue. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief. And we have one more presentation, Municipal Court, Mrs. Toda.
I will keep this brief. I know I'm between here and home, so I will do my best to be quick.
Typical municipal court.
So tonight I'm here to present on municipal court, and what we do is we process and handle all Class C misdemeanor violations within the city from various departments, including both the police and fire department, code enforcement, animal control, and citizen complaints as well. We focus primarily on 3 different areas: customer service, judicial processes, and administration. So this is our our proposed organizational chart for fiscal year 2022. We are looking to reclassify 2 of our existing positions. The assistant court administrator position will be transitioning to a court operations supervisor, and then we're also transitioning one of our court clerk positions to a juvenile case manager. This will align better with some of our goals going forward. Our department mission is ultimately to ensure access to justice, that the legal rights of individuals are safeguarded, and public interest is protected. On our goals and objectives here, our 3 main goals: providing strategic and operational direction for the operations of the municipal court to ensure the access to justice, leverage innovative solutions to expand court services and enhance process efficiencies, and enhance public safety and quality of life through community outreach initiatives. On our strategic operational direction, with that one, we have legislative changes that are coming that we'll be focusing on with this next year, transitioning court from remote proceedings to more of a hybrid model to allow citizens to respond how they want to appear for court. On our innovative solutions, one of the things I'm really excited about is with the adoption of the 2021 fire code, we will be looking to have ticket writer software for our fire marshal's department. And so that's something in collaboration with them that we'll be getting the ticket writer software that they can utilize for ticket filing. Additionally, you heard Police Chief mention the electronic warrant interface. I'm excited about that. That will help streamline some of our efficiencies between the various departments. And then also an e-file system, and that is more for our electronic or correspondence from attorneys and other outside parties outside the city. With the public safety and quality of life, one of the things is related to the juvenile case manager position, really focusing on the young offenders to allow them opportunities to discharge their fines and costs through various ways. And that will be in coordination with our judge and our juvenile case manager. And then just expanding on some of our other platforms, social media. Java with the Judge has been a huge hit. So we will continue some of those efforts for this next year. These are some of our photos of some of our 2021 highlights here. We had certification occurring within our court, awards. That's Judge Heinold there in the middle doing community outreach. And really what I'm most proud about of 2021 has really been the court's response to COVID in providing citizens with alternative methods of case resolution, whether that's through our Zoom platform for court. We also had an IVR system for phone payments that was launched last summer. We've expanded our online resolution options through our payment portal, as well as text messaging utilization through our software system as well. And a few more photos here of some of our highlights, a couple of the awards that we received. These are some of our metrics here. Now, these are not my finalized metrics, but this is what I am presenting tonight. When it comes to cases filed versus disposed, our ultimate goal is to dispose more cases than are being filed. And 2021 posed some challenges for us. There were extended deadlines, less cases being filed in general. And so with that, we did not close as many cases, projected at this time, but we hope that that will be improved in the future. With our case filing, we do average about 75% of our caseload is traffic related. However, we are seeing an uptick in code enforcement related. Here's 6.65% in 2020, and then 7.89% in 2021, and that's city ordinance mostly related to animal control related violations. But I anticipate that increasing more with the transition to the court of record. You'll see more of those cases in that as well, but there's been a huge uptake in animal control violations we're receiving. And then with our warrant data, we have warrants issued versus warrants cleared. for 2020 and for 2021. Some of our efficiencies are the reorganization as we look after the salary study had been completed, some of the ways we can reorganize our department to really help manage caseloads better, both based on current and future caseload trends, our code enforcement related violations, and even fire marshal related health and safety related violations take a little bit more time. And so with that reorganization, we can focus more time on those types of cases. Implementing process improvement efficiencies through electronic filing for both internal and external case parties, the ticket writers, the e-file system, the electronic warrants are things that we'll be looking to implement in this next year. And then not this year, but in fiscal year 2023 or beyond, we are looking to move our software system. We are currently hosted internally, and we would like to look to move towards having that hosted through more of a cloud-based through Tyler Technologies to ease the burden on our local IT and reduce some of those internal server and hardware costs to maintain that. Another benefit of that would also be allowing us to have a fixed annual maintenance fee for a 3-year period. I don't know if that's after 3 years it's fixed again with a slight increase, but right now we have a 2% increase every year on our annual maintenance. Our 2022 programs and initiatives would be procedural changes related to the municipal court record transition. I know the HR department is looking to establish an internship program within the city, and so one thing we'd like to do is have an intern that could help us improve some of those case and workflow management, help us to improve on that. A case resolution program to help decrease the time to disposition rates through collections and alternative disposition methods, and really utilizing skip tracing software to allow us to find out where people have moved to or changed to, and that's going to help us more with our case resolution program. The juvenile case manager and teen court program utilizing special funds, which are the juvenile case manager funds. And then the child safety grant to partnership program we are working on still developing, as well as the child safety seat program that will be in partnership with the police department and also the fire marshal's office. And that's through the child safety special funds. For our expenditure overview here, our overall expenditures are increasing by a little over $70,000, and that is primarily due to the personnel cost. There's a $48,000 adjustment for the phase 2 salary study, and then that is actually mostly just benefit related, the rest of that difference there. That does not include the municipal court judge in that. That would just be the municipal court's personnel, the 5 positions within the municipal court department. For our maintenance and operations increase, that is primarily due to the ticket writer software, and then also we are adding in an additional skip tracing license to allow us to have more access to find, to use that for our case resolution program that we'll be having. And then for contractual services here, this is primarily due to a cell phone as well as a hotspot to allow for remote work as needed. We've been using that between myself and the court operations supervisor. And then we have a decrease here for capital outlay and $400, and that's just due to having 2 laptops replaced this year. And this past year, we had a printer that was replaced. And on for the revenues here, this does not show special funds. This is just showing our general fund collections. There is another story just for the special funds related expenditures as well as anticipated revenues on those. And so we are trending down. Now I will say in the past few weeks, we are trending up. So I could see us having actually more cases filed this year versus last year with COVID. We are starting to see a higher increase in our caseload. And so, but this is what we have currently. And I'll take any questions if you have them.
No. Thank you. Mr. Garza, do you have anything to add? Preview tomorrow. You want to get up and speak and give it to us?
I could do it from here. So that concludes our categories for this evening. Tomorrow we will pick right back up at 5 and we'll kick it off with development services. as well as Parks and Rec Department, Library. Tomorrow we'll also hear from Public Works, which obviously, as you know, includes general fund and utility. And so that's a pretty comprehensive report. Tomorrow we'll hear from Daryl Lisak and Environmental Services. And that should wrap it up tomorrow. And I'll conclude with just a review of the budget calendar for the next few months.
Thank you. Anything else
You're
from
welcome.
council? Good. Meeting adjourned.
All right, thank you.